Colleagues, we'll start in just a couple of moments.
Some days.
As we have quorum, I'm acknowledging this third meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. And we'd like to announce the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for Council, Standing or Advisory Committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519, 661-2489, extension 2425. And to make a specific request to this meeting, please contact sppc@london.ca. So with that, I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I have nothing on the consent agenda. Colleagues, we've got scheduled items to be heard not before 4 o'clock in public participation. So I'm going to move us to the items that are on the back of the agenda. If you humor me, I'd like to go in reverse order, unless anybody has an objection, and deal first with the resignation of Councillor Cassidy from RBC Place London Board. You've received a letter accordingly, so I'll look for a mover. No one wants you to leave. We're not letting you move it. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Pelosi. Any comments or questions? And as we do this motion, I'm just going to acknowledge that as we did when we dealt with the Police Services Board appointment, I would look for council to make the determination at the next council meeting for a councillor to fill this vacant position, if there is one so inclined, and I imagine that there will be. So with that, any other comments or questions? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thank you. And again, colleagues, I'll acknowledge that was to receive the letter from Councillor Cassidy. And Councillor Cassidy, it was a pleasure working with you on RBC Place Board. And I guess I have the pleasure to work with you again on the Police Services Board. So we'll still hang out from time to time. On 5.1, we have the proposed changes to the City Manager Search Committee terms of reference. I know there is a motion in front of you. Why don't we get the motion on the table and then on the floor, and then we can have some discussion just so it's clear what it is that we're voting for. And what I would like to do is speak to it so that there's clarity, and I might be able to help move this along. Moved by Councillor Squires, seconded by Councillor Lewis. And I'll just ask the clerk, can I speak from the chair for clarity around this motion? So what you have, first thing I would tell you is that versus what is on the formal agenda, there's been a slight amendment to this, and I wonder if I could either ask, just so it's clear, and you've got a copy of that in front of you now, I believe, of the amended motion, which I presume is acceptable, and I'm going to ask the mover to speak to it just so there's clarity around it, and then I'll make some comments. Councillor Squire.
Yeah, maybe since it's my motion, seconded by Councillor Lewis, what you received on January 16th is the original motion. I am fine with that motion. The alternative wording is, has been sent to provide, I suppose, further clarity. I don't think it's necessary. I'm happy with what we have. All that the addition really says is that council members will make their best effort to participate in the bias-free hiring training. It's not a requirement, but they are to make their best efforts to do that. But I think the original motion is fine as is. I like it better as a lawyer. It's shorter, sweeter, and clearer than the other thing, and probably would bring about less debate. So I really like that.
And for some lawyers, rarer when it's as concise and tight, but not in your case, of course. Let me speak to it for just a moment, colleagues. I've spoken to our search committee folks who are responsible for this as well. So basically what this nets down to is this. It is the intention on February the 5th for the committee that has been empowered by council to review in face-to-face. So am I allowed to get into this a little bit here?
As long as you don't use any names.
I will not use names. Ed Holder will be there. Let's just use that name. To look at a list of candidates that have been shortlisted. That's a confidential list. That's for committee to deal with as directed by council. And from that, it would be committee's intention to shorten that list to a subsequent meeting, which was originally and still scheduled for February the 12th, effectively a 9 till 5 timeframe. So in speaking to our consultant, and consistent with what this motion is intended to do, is that ultimately, through a special SPPC meeting, it would be the opportunity for all, and with full participation of council, to interview the finalists. I call it the +1 category. So February 5th, we have the short list of interviews that committee is dealing with to get to the shorter list. It's that shorter list that currently is scheduled for committee on February the 12th. However, having said that, it was the recommendation of the consultant that that short list of the +1s be done one time. So that would be our SPPC meeting if this motion goes through. If it works on the 12th of February, terrific, but it would be, the commitment would be from 9 until 5. And then ultimately, just to give you which I'm assured, even with a full SPPC meeting, it can be accomplished within that time frame. That has the potential to be 2, 3, whatever the committee ultimately determines as that +1 list. All to say, if it works for council to have a special day on the 12th, for the finalists, then that's what we would do if it's the pleasure of council. Failing that, we'll look to the clerk to help us find a common date that will work and then ultimately be approved by a subsequent council meeting. The notion of that as a special SPPC meeting would be to do the interview of the finalists and then come up with a recommendation of one ultimately to be approved by council. So that's the gist of it. I'll come to you in just a moment, Councillor Squire. And so the notion of the bias-free training, why I like, and I don't want to speak overly to this, but best efforts as opposed to not referencing it, is because we cannot compel colleagues, councillors to have to attend an SPPC meeting. We could compel, if you recall the direction, if it was going to be a general meeting, that before they were in a participatory process, that they would be compelled to take that training. So that's it. Councillor Squire, you have some comments.
Yes. Let me boil it down to what I brought forward with Councillor Lewis. The original permission in the terms of reference was that the search committee could effectively come to council through the SPPC with one candidate and say, this is the person we have chosen for city manager, yay or nay. Many councillors in my talking to them did not want that process. They wanted something where the council as a whole would have an opportunity to make an evaluation. All this is doing is saying, committee, do your work, come up with 3 names. We will interview the 3 as a council, and we will come up with the preferred final candidate. End of explanation as far as what we are doing. In terms of why I think this is important. My experience was as the chair of the London District Catholic School Board, and we went through the process of hiring a new director of education. Let me tell you that every single trustee went to the meetings to interview. There was no special committee. These are decisions that are of such importance that the full council needs to weigh in at some point in time as to who they want the new city manager to be. I can't imagine that is a controversial or difficult idea. All it's doing is involving all of council back into the process at the end. The alternative is to say, let's stay where we are, have one person, and then if I don't like the person, or I don't think they're up to doing the job, or they're not my preferred candidate, I vote against one person. That's where I'm left. So I think this is a preferred process. I think this is the one we should undertake. I also don't think there should be impediments of any type, and I won't mention any in particular, to counselors being involved. I've signed up for the bias-free training. I can promise you I will have an absolute bias in favor of the best candidate.
Very noble. Councillor Lewis, before we Councillor Lewis, just, there had been a question before about questions, and we would get support and help from our consultant to support the questions, and there'd be some free flow as well, but it won't be going in blind, just so that you're aware. Councillor Lewis.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and colleagues. I seconded this motion, and I do want you to support it, and I want to be clear that this in no way devalues the work that the search committee has done at this point. In fact, I very much appreciate all the extra time and energy that colleagues have put in terms of interviewing the candidates that have come forward and working towards a smaller list. But like Councillor Squire, I don't want to see for the first time a recommendation of one person who I have to either vote yay or nay on. I very much want the committee to bring to all of us, because it is going to impact all of our jobs in terms of how we interact with our city staff, where the leadership takes us in the future. I want us to all have a say in who our preferred candidate is, and out of that selection process, we will then ultimately come to a consensus on who that candidate is and approve them as a council at that point. But I think to move or to stay with a process that only brings forward one name, brought forward only by the members of the committee, not that they're not doing their due diligence, but it does put council in a very difficult position. And I think that I've certainly heard from colleagues as well that there's a desire to have at least a couple of names to choose from. And I think that this gives us that opportunity to have that discussion in a group, to hear from the candidates in that short list. And I too will be signing up for the bias-free training. I hope that it works for everybody's schedule. I recognize that it can't. So I support actually the amendment of the softer language that says, that we make our best efforts to do that. I know that people have all kinds of commitments, but I think it's important that we make an effort.
I heard that Councillor Squire was a bit ambivalent, but could live with the bias-free training as noted. And Councillor Squire, can you accept that as we go forward? If not, we're going to dance on this a little bit more. Just yes or no would be great.
I'm sorry, I'm not ambivalent about bias-free training. I think it's a good idea. What is it that I'm ambivalent about?
Oh, that your original motion versus the one that referenced
You can add in that we make our best efforts.
That's what I'm
fine with that.
What I'm looking for. Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, and I guess I'm generally supportive of the this amendment to the terms of reference. I do have a couple questions, though, and just so I understand it myself, that we are changing the recommendation that the committee now goes to SPPC and not through corporate services. I think with this recommendation, does that clarify that? Because the original terms of reference said that the search committee through the corporate services committee will recommend, so we're taking that completely out and it goes specifically now to SPPC. I just want clarification.
Let's get the response from the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reports from the committee would still go through corporate services, but the actual interviews of the short list would be through SPPC.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you for that clarification. The second question I have too, and I'm generally supportive of the three candidates going to SPPC. I do.
A point of clarification, we didn't say three, we just said finalists, just so you know, so it'll be something shorter than the six. It may be three, it may not be, just to be clear. Well,
I've got it different, and that's what I need clarification, because
I
I
appreciate
do
that.
not want to stop the committee from doing its work and limiting them up to three. I would recommend that we put at least three in the recommendation, so that allows the committee to come up with as many recommendations as they would like. So I would like clarification on that. And the second question, specific to how we are going to be voting on these candidates that will be coming to SPPC, will that be done through rank balloting as well?
okay, two things. Firstly, I acknowledge the reference to three that was in the recommendation. That's on me. There's been a suggestion made that it be at least three. This is a moving target, it seems to me at this point, but that's the will of council. As far as, so we'll come back to that as need be. I would address the point as far as how we vote on them. I think that's up to committee to deal with that. That's the direction I have from the clerk. But we'll be prepared if that's the direction of the committee to deal with it on that basis.
If I could have clarification, which committee makes that decision?
Through Mr. Mayor, that would be SPPC after the interviews have been undertaken.
And then the discussion on rank balloting would take place if we use rank balloting or not. I just would like to know the process as best as possible as we move forward with this.
Unless you want me to tackle it.
Yes, as in any case, the committee has option of how they wish to go through the selection process, even when it's advisory committees or standing committees. We'll always be prepared with the electronic voting system for multiple candidates, but ultimately the committee would need to decide at that time whether there's a need to go through that process or not.
Are we good? Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, just the question around making a friendly amendment to at least three.
That's up to the mover and seconder.
I won't agree to that as a friendly amendment. There has to be some structure to this process. If we've got 6 candidates coming forward for final interviews, it's going to be with all frankness, it's going to be a cumbersome process. Generally, when I've been involved, there's a reduction down to a number that's about 3, and that's why I picked it. So no, I wouldn't just leave it open. I think that's going to be difficult for the committee because they'll go into a process where they'll be going, well, we've got 6 people here, why don't we just send all 6? And I'm just picking that number, so I want to leave it.
All right. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you, I have a question to the clerk based on a comment that the mayor made about the bias-free training, that it's not a requirement for the SPPC. However, there was I don't know, a comment that made it sound like anyone that still wishes to attend the search committee meetings is compelled to take the bias-free training. I want to speak personally on my own behalf that I've tried with my staff to find an available time to take that bias-free training, and it conflicts with SPPC meetings. So there seems to be an unbreakable obstacle in my path.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt a little bit, Councillor, because I want to clarify something. If the intention was that council members were going to participate in the search committee's review of the finalists, then the bias-free training was compulsory. We cannot compel councillors in SPPC, attending SPPC meeting to take the bias-free training, hence the recommendations. So the intent of this is to replace the February 12th meeting with an SPPC meeting of some date, so that negates the The requirement doesn't change the recommendation that people should consider it. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is still a February 5th date where interviews will take place. And my question through you to the clerk is there anything in the terms of reference of the subcommittee or in the council procedure bylaw that says councillors can be compelled to take training?
Let me respond to that. As I think was evidenced in the initial meeting that this committee has had, is that the committee, as directed by council, has its work to do, and it's the committee's responsibility, not council's. So council's participation in this is not only limited, but effectively doesn't exist. So for this purpose, there's no need for bias-free training for that, because this is the work of committee as directed by council.
Thank you.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So then I guess I'm going to be direct. I want to come on February 5th. I want to observe. I'm not looking to participate. I understand we have set up this committee to do the interviews, and I'm fine with that. So my question is, will I be allowed to attend on February 5th, or will I be barred from this meeting?
I would never bar you from a meeting. In fact, everyone is invited, and as we have clarified in the prior meetings, all councillors are able to attend all meetings. So I just want to put that on the table. But they will be there as observers if they're not part of the committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Holst.
I'll be supporting this motion, Your Worship. I think it provides some efficiencies. I know that myself, I would have no problem voting against one candidate and encouraging others to vote against a candidate that I wasn't happy with. However, were it to happen that we voted against the single selection from the committee, where would we be after that? We would have to provide more direction to the committee, come up with a new terms of reference or something like that. So this at least allows us a way to get to a second candidate. So I think it's going to be a very much more efficient process should the initial recommendation not be the favorite of the council.
Again, to be clear to colleagues, the intention after the February 5th meeting is to come up with a short list of individuals to be reviewed by SPPC if this motion goes through. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, good debate, good discussion. I'm happy colleagues are being clear on what they want from the search committee, because as a member of the search committee, I certainly don't want to do hours and hours and hours of work and not have council be happy with the process. So I'm really glad that we're clarifying the process now. It means that we have something that we can agree on, and then we can continue with the work. What I want to understand is just the difference in the process when we make this change. Not that I'm against it, but I just want to understand the differences. So in the process before the motion today, when would we be making a final decision on a city manager, assuming that the interviews all produced kind of the expected result and it went through corporate services and it went to council? And in the new scenario, do we still kind of hit that same time frame, or are we going to call a special meeting? I heard the mayor say, or perhaps we're using the same February 12th date and just replacing it with SPPC. I'd just like to understand, whether it's approximately the same time frame, and that's just helpful for information purposes.
I'll let the clerk respond in a moment, but to answer the second part first, subject to the availability of all colleagues for February 12th, that could well be our SPPC, our special SPPC meeting for the purpose of interviewing these finalist candidates. I have some thoughts on the first part, but I'll let the clerk respond, and then we'll go from there.
Through Mr. Mayor, based on the schedule that had been set for the search committee, the recommendation from corporate services for the final selected candidate would have been February 18th, and that would have reported out to council on March the 2nd. Assuming that SPPC is making a recommendation instead, and if council agrees to the February 12th for a special meeting, it would be reporting out at the same March 2nd council meeting.
Thank you. I have no one else on the list. Oh, pardon me, Councillor Morgan, you have more to say.
Yeah, so given that the time frame is the same, I'm happy to go with whatever the majority of council wants. As long as everybody's happy with the process and we decide today and we continue forward with it, I think that, you know, the real work is selecting someone who's going to be great for our city, and we can finalize the any sort of concerns colleagues have today, and then agree on a process and then complete under the same time frame.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to weigh in on this? Otherwise, there is a motion on the table. Seeing none, then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Councilor Plaza.
Point for clarification on D. D on the screen is not D as handed out by the city clerk, saying that councilors would make their best effort to participate in the bias-free training. What's on the screen says that we shall complete the bias-free training.
The intention, the motion is best efforts, is what it is. So I appreciate, we'll just, clerk, do you want to clarify that? The clerk's going to cancel that, replace it with the recommended motion, and then we'll vote accordingly. So if you've already voted, you get to do it again. We'll turn your attention to the screen now as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the clarification, Councillor Pelosa. I would just make one other comment. Would you, I'd invite colleagues to check their schedules for September 12th, pardon me? What did I say? September. We're going to keep Martin a little longer. He doesn't know it yet, but February the 12th. And if you could advise the clerk once you've checked that. I think a straw vote without Councillor Turner here is not helpful. So I think with that, please check your calendar for that, and we would declare that, if available, February 12th, an SPPC special meeting. Thank you. I'd now like to turn our attention to items for direction 4.1 of our agenda, which is London Hydro proposed corporate restructuring. Mr. Hayward, welcome back, or welcome. Or what do I say anymore? I thought you were gone, but please go ahead.
Somebody told me it was the longest goodbye they've ever had. I think only eclipsed by the Rolling Stones farewell tour or something like that. Through the chair, first day I didn't actually come into work, I get the dreaded lurgy, so I'm officially telling you that retirement seems to be unhealthy. I'm not sure. So what you have in front of you is a report on London Hydro corporate restructuring, and this is a proposal from London Hydro. If you look at figure 1 on page 31, you'll see that council is the sole shareholder through SPPC, as the sole shareholder of the London Hydro Incorporated, which is a local distribution corporation. That is a highly regulated corporation through the OEB, through the Ontario Energy Board. And they have engaged in some non-regulated activities and investments which are basically restricted by the OEB and through being an LDC. What they're saying is that greater return could be achieved if those non-regulated investments, if we move to a slightly different configuration of the organization. And that you can see on figure 2, which is on page 32, which is where London holding company would report into the shareholder. And that holding company would be responsible for London Hydro Inc., which would be the regulated portion. And then there would be a non-regulated element which would allow the board of the hold company to undertake different things with those investments and get a greater return. Both returns from the holding from the non-regulated and the regulated would return to the shareholder, depending on what the declaration, shareholder declaration and so on said. So that's kind of the intent, is to basically allow greater returns to come and a little bit more flexibility on those non-regulated elements. In terms of this process, there's a lot of detail in terms of transactional detail. There's income tax implications that can come about as a result. There are increased risk factors that we want to make sure we are aware of. So we undertook a preliminary review of the preliminary information and employed KPMG to assist us with that. And what we're asking for you tonight is to direct us to take a more detailed examination. We're not asking you to endorse this restructuring. We need to get more information. We need to be able to lay out clearly to you what the implications are. We do have some of the more general items laid out in the report. So you've got the proposal from London Hydro. You also have KPMG's risk assessment and tax implications attached. But this is really not intended to affect the local distribution company or London Hydro Inc., but it is intended to free up the other piece so that you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of gaining greater returns. How long would this take to do this review? Well, we'd be aiming basically for September, probably around September the 12th, as the mayor indicated. But somewhere in that time frame. But this is a very complex transactional issue, and we need to make sure we get it right, and so that the analysis and recommendation that we would then provide you would be on the nail. So that's what we're asking from you, is that you just approve us to go ahead and undertake a more detailed investigation to report back to you with a recommendation.
So colleagues, in front of you on page 66 are the A, B, and C of the recommendation. Before we look for motions, let's get some discussion as need be and appropriate. I'll start a list. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Hillier.
Yes, with regards to page 36 on the risk management for existing regulated corporation, number 1, the only change is except for the amendment to grant the corporation authority to issue debt for its core business. Could you expand upon that?
Mr. Sherwood.
So through the chair, in the course of its normal business, London Hydro will issue a certain amount of debt. They have a debt to equity ratio that they're trying to deal with. When they go above a certain amount, will need our permission at this point. There we go. They will, when they go above a certain amount, will need our sign off and issue. And it really does cause some issues as we get to those stages, because it really is part of their normal business approach as their funding or financing, capital replacements and those types of things.
Councillor, thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Well, let's get a little more fully on the table. And is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I certainly support the idea of doing some more detailed analysis. I'm glad to have this kind of interim report outlining some of the issues that have been noticed and some of the complexities involved. I think we do have to be very careful when we're dealing with this matter. And personally, I think having a report now where we can think about it for a while and get a future analysis in the coming months, I think is very helpful. I just wonder, in terms of the overall time frame, when we think we might be getting that more detailed analysis, broad picture, not necessarily a specific day.
Mr. Hayward.
So through the chair, we're going to aim for September timeframe. The mayor was right, but that was on a different motion, so we won't go down there. But basically, that's what we're aiming for. However, because of the complexities and because of working with this is going to sound horrible because of working with lawyers and on this complex deal and that type of thing. It will take a little bit to get the wording right. And it's not meant as a negative or anything. This is complex, and so we want to make sure it's right. And it depends on the availability of the right lawyers and that type of thing as well, because this is a number of hydros are going through similar discussions, and how do they deal with the non-regulated elements and that type of thing. So,
Could I help the city manager out a little bit? SPPC is September 22nd, so I was ahead of myself by 10 days on a different motion. So that would be the time frame if September ultimately is the date that we're shooting for as well. Other comments or questions, Deputy Mayor? Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm thrilled to be supporting this. It's exciting how our utility is at the forefront in innovation and technology. Actually, a motion like this wouldn't even be required were we not doing so well on that front, because we're already selling services to other utilities that we've innovated, and this is going to allow us to sell beyond Ontario. It just opens up some great opportunities to make use of the things that we've innovated. So wonderful to do this. The details that we need to come back are some just technical ones. We need to transfer some assets from the London Hydro to the holding company, and it's just a matter of which way to do that. There's a couple ways to do it. One of them has lower tax implications, so we'll get those kind of details, and then it'll give us an opportunity to vote on moving this forward. But great work on preparing this so far. This is exciting for London Hydro. We're moving forward. Every month we see new things coming up, so I'm happy to support this, and hope you all will too.
So this has been moved and seconded. I have no other speakers on the list except for Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, and knowing that we have to wait until 4 o'clock before some things get going.
We're allowed to take a break. We don't have to fill the space, but we'd love to hear what you have to say.
So I just want to echo some of Deputy Mayor's comments to staff. I like this reasoned approach. I like the idea of having this interim report. I do remember the report that came from London Hydro and the Board of Directors when they first proposed this idea. So I'm excited to see it moving forward. I did a tour of London Hydro, and I saw some of the really cool things that they are doing on the technology side. When it comes to a smaller, medium-sized utility, we're kind of boxed in as far as our options go. You know, we have the big behemoths, and we're seeing the field shrinking further and further. So this is a really, I hope everybody appreciates the forward thinking of London Hydro to move in this direction, rather than say, well, we're kind of stuck where we are and we can't do anything more, to see this kind of innovation and a new path to forge. And I think it's really valuable to the City of London to have this kind of board as one of our assets. So I will definitely be supporting this.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for the speakers list? Seeing none, then we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Next on the agenda are the scheduled items 3.1. You'll note that according to our agenda, they are not to be heard before 4 p.m. as a result of this being a public participation meeting. Here's the good news. At 4 o'clock, I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Morgan, who's responsible for a multi-year budget, and as this process ties into that. So at this point, let's look for a motion to have a brief recess until 4 o'clock. Councillor, do you have a question, or are you moving? Moving, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cassidy, thank you very much. Let's do a hand vote. All those in favor? That looks as unanimous as it gets. We'll see you back at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting back to order after our recess. We are on item 3.1, which is not to be heard before 4 o'clock. It's 5 after 4 now, so we're good to go. This is the public participation meeting, the first public participation meeting for the 2020 to 2023 multi-year budget. I'm just going to go over a couple of things so that everybody's clear on how this will proceed. If you've taken a look at our added agenda, what you will see is a number of pieces of communication. However, on that, there are 2 official delegations. So at a public participation meeting, our advisory committees would request official delegations, and we have 2 of our advisory committees who have requested that. Everyone else has provided correspondence, and anyone else is welcome to speak at this public participation meeting. Everyone will have 5 minutes. And given the number of people in the room, I will be very strict on that. I will cut you off at 5 minutes. We just need to make sure that we get to as many people as possible. And we want to respect everybody's time, so we're going to give everybody an equal amount of time. Now, I will say that doesn't mean that that's your only opportunity to participate in the budget process. This is by no means the only way. This is one of many avenues to participate in the multi-year budget process. This is one of the opportunities to speak directly to council on the multi-year budget. If you go to london.ca/budget, there are key dates on there. And on that page, you will find a large number of ward meetings across the city that individual councillors are hosting. You could go there and speak to councillors individually. You could submit information directly to our finance staff through budget@london.ca. And of course, there will be another opportunity to come back for a public participation meeting like this after council has engaged in the budget debates, which we have done none of yet. But after we engage in some of the debates, having heard from the public, on February 13th at 6 p.m., there'll be another opportunity to come back and let council know how you feel. So although we will be pretty strict on time today, there is many, many opportunities to participate and share more extended thoughts on the budget process with the elected officials and our finance staff and team. So in a moment, we will open the public participation meeting. When we do that, I'm going to do the official delegations first. You'll see council make a motion to receive the other pieces of correspondence. That's just a formality. We'll open the public participation meeting after that. We'll have the delegations from the advisory committees. And then there are 2 delegations that I'm aware of that require access to the floor. Mr. LaHaye will be presenting from the floor his 5-minute delegation, and the London Community Foundation has some slides, and so they will be presenting from the floor. My preference is to deal with them first so that we can clear the floor and simply work with the gallery after that. So that's just 4 items that will be dealt with at the front of the public participation meeting. So that's it. That's what we're going to do. So the first thing I need to do is I'll bring up a motion from council, look for a mover and a seconder to receive the communications from members of the public who wrote in. That is on your agenda, everything except A and P, which are official delegations. Moved by Councillor Kaibaga, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Any discussion on that? Okay, we'll bring that up for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Now I need a motion to open the public. Now I need a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Lehman, we'll put that on 2 vote.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 14-0.
Okay, so first up, we will deal with the two delegations from our advisory committees. So I will ask the Accessibility Advisory Committee to approach the podium and prepare your delegation. I'll ask if representatives from the Cycling Advisory Committee to kind of be ready to go next, because they'll be the next delegation.
That's okay, I'll take care of it.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Chair and members of the SPCC, my name is Ashfaq Hussain. I'm here today representing the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We're here to talk in favor of the budget request made by the London Transit Commission. Over the past 19 years, I have volunteered my services with the Accessibility Advisory Committee, served as the chair, past vice chair, and currently I sit as a resource member of the advisory committee. Over these 18 or so years, we have collaborated with many local organizations, community organizations here in the City of London. We have held many open houses and such with members from within our community here in the City of London. In each of these discussions that we've had with these organizations, the number one issue that has always come to the top has been of transit. Transit is important to us. It's vital to us. It's the only means by which we are able to get from point A to B. It's the way we get to entertainment, to the London Knights hockey game, to the Grand Theatre, to movies, and of course to get to work. We all want to work, and transit plays a vital role in that service. Over these 19 years, we've made numerous presentations to you while collaborating with these organizations. And you have listened. 2 years ago, you took the bold step of not just listening to us and acting on our request, but you went a step further in that you created subsidized bus passes, not just for persons with disabilities, but for some of London's most vulnerable populations. These bus passes have enabled us to take advantage of all that is offered within the City of London. It's given us an opportunity to participate fully within the city, and hence it is so important for you for us to support the budget request made by the London Transit Commission. I'll pass the discussion on to Natalie. Natalie.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natalie Judges, and I'm a member of the Accessibility Committee of London. And I'd just like to stress the importance of transit, and especially paratransit, within our city. As we're all aware, it's a system that really needs to be improved. For missing medical appointments to booking just leisurely trips, I personally have not been able to make these appointments because of paratransit bookings. And also ACC wants to continue to work with the city. This budget support is not because of its best option, but rather it's the lesser of two evils. A reduction in budget would not equal a return to status quo, but would rather a reduction in service. ACC is committed to working on a no-cost measure to improve City of London accessibility. For example, marketing efforts designed to encourage businesses and to residents to shovel sidewalks and access city.
I'll just summarize. My name is Jay Menard. I'm the new chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We appreciate that there are needs throughout the city, and we know there's limitations. Realistically, there's only so much money that goes around. What we want to make sure everybody focuses on is that accessibility is about community. It's not just about the people that you see here, the people that we're representing on our community. Accessibility is for age-friendly. Accessibility supports anti-poverty measures. Accessibility supports everyone in this community. As an advisory committee, it's really hard for us to come here and not ask for more. What we're asking for is just don't regress. The budget that the Transit Commission is asking for is basically only going to allow for a maintenance of the status quo. It's not even going to meet the increased needs that we're going to have. So we ask that you support this because we do need to maintain that level of status quo. We support it because it is a small step towards improving accessibility, but we are committed to doing more and working with you. I want to thank you for your time and support. We do ask that you consider this, and thank you for the time you gave us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
We will move on to the Cycling Advisory Committee, I believe up at the microphone.
Okay. Dear Council, city staff, and fellow Londoners, I'm honored to be here speaking to all of you as the chair of the Cycling Advisory Committee at such an important and critical time in the city's evolution. No other work does more to determine the direction of the city than the budget, and even more so with London's multi-year budget. I know that we are all here to work together towards creating a better future for all Londoners across strategic priorities that are both complex and competing. London, by all accounts, is at a tipping point in terms of the economy and the environment, and yet our budget priorities paint a radically different picture, which is incongruent with the realities we face. Many Londoners are facing economic struggles, and yet in the capital budget, we are planning to spend the vast majority of our limited resources on the most expensive and most inefficient form of transportation for both the city and individuals. CAA calculates that driving a four-door car will cost an Ontarian roughly $8,500 per year. Add to that the cost of road maintenance, emergency services, and other non-municipal costs, and the cost of automobility balloons further. We are facing a rapidly warming climate and declared a climate emergency with a mandate to curb our carbon emissions quickly. Australia burns, Jakarta floods, Newfoundland is buried, and the entire month of January in London has been 5 degrees Celsius above normal, resulting in an unusual flood event in the middle of winter. And despite a Vision Zero policy that states no death is acceptable, people on bikes are injured and die on our roads. When we tally the costs associated with emergency services and medical treatment, legal fees and funerals, travel delay, and productivity loss at work, and pain and suffering, we've conservatively estimated that London spends $22 million every year on cyclists' injuries. The city has policies to address these issues, yet they remain underfunded. The Cycling Master Plan of 2016, the adoption of Vision Zero in 2017, and the Climate Emergency Declaration of 2019 are all forward-thinking policies, and yet we are poised to adopt a budget that leaves each area without necessary resources to reach our goals. In fact, this budget indicates a deprioritization of walking, cycling, safe streets, and climate emergency. Specifically, the current Cycling Master Plan aims for a 5% mode share of cycling by 2030. Yet when asked, staff were unable to provide a standalone figure of how much is going to be spent to reach that goal, nor how the existing plan will even get to the 5% target. Even when roughly estimated, based on combing through reports, the best guess we've made is around $15 million over 10 years, or 0.03% of the city's overall budget. The Cycling Advisory Committee is concerned that this is wholly inadequate to reach the city-mandated goals, especially when comparing London to similar cities' goals and budget allocations. Early results from cities such as Kitchener-Waterloo, Ottawa, Victoria, and Halifax have all shown increases in cycling and mobility for their citizens. These cities all have roughly equivalent goals to London, with either harsher climates or more variable topography. Yet they are seeing more people using bikes to get around their cities because they are investing in the development of their city's cycling plans. These cities and many others understand that the funding of active transportation not only make a stronger and greener community, but also a better investment from an economic and public health standpoint too. Consistently, retail districts with bike infrastructure do better than those without, and cycling for transportation has been shown to decrease mortality from both cancer and heart rate. Lastly, there's a significant gap in terms of staff resource allocations to active transportation and execution of the Cycling Master Plan. A fair generalization is that every other city executing a Cycling Master Plan has several dedicated staff members to oversee it completed cost-effectively and to the highest standards. For example, Waterloo Region has more than 10 dedicated staff members implementing their cycling and walking strategies, while Greater Victoria, with a similar population to London, has more than a dozen staff allocated to walking and cycling. This staffing gap in active transportation was identified in an analysis by Western University in 2010, and yet we stand 10 years later without a single staff member at the City of London dedicated to implementing the cycling master plan. A long, hard look must be taken at the four-year budget that is now tabled. It's time that we stand up as a city and stick to our plans and policies to ensure affordability, safety, and effective transportation options for all Londoners across all modes. We literally, as a city, cannot afford to keep going on the path that we are currently, yet that is what this budget proposes we do. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions, comments you may have.
Thank you. We won't be taking any questions or comments right now because we've got lots of members of the public, but we certainly know where to reach you and appreciate the presentation. At this time, that is our two official delegations from our advisory committees. We're going to move to thoughts from the general public. As I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of people who have requested to use the podium. So Mr. Lehay will be next. The London Community Foundation, if you could have the representative speaking, just come down and be prepared to go after Mr. Lehay. And I believe, Mr. Levin, you required the podium as well. So if you want to come down, we'll get to you after that, and then we'll clear the floor and go to everybody in the audience after that. So Mr. Lehay, whenever you're ready. And just now that we're into individual delegations, if you just want to, I said your name, but in general, the principle is share your name at the start of your delegation so we know who it is, and we can make our notes and refer back. If you're comfortable sharing your address, you're welcome to share it, but you're not required to do so at this public participation meeting.
Thank you very much to the committee for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jerry Lehay. While I do sit on the Accessibility Committee and the Community Diversity and Inclusivity Committee, I'm speaking today as myself representing many, many folks that have disabilities. I live here in London. I think many of you know me as the pantsless rambler guy that won't stop complaining about the sidewalks and snow removal. I conducted a petition requesting that the city, year-round barrier-free access to sidewalks in London. It's a basic right. Many Londoners face obstacles as they travel in the city. I'm asking that London City Council make it a high priority and focus on ensuring we can access sidewalks every day of the year, especially during the snowy months. Those of us with disabilities, pedestrians with small children, anyone who uses a sidewalk should not be prevented from traveling in an active society. Now, when I submitted a request to speak, we were at 830 signature on the petition. Thanks to a little bit of a media exposure this weekend, we are now over 1,800 signatures on this petition. The petition has garnered a lot of interest and an increase in the signatures, and it's obvious to me that it has struck a nerve. Why create it? Every year we go through this. And I will say right off the top, I recognize that doing a budget sometimes it's a no-win. Everybody's coming, they want money, or they don't want you to spend the money. But when we look at a society like myself today, and I'm not just speaking about myself today, I'm speaking about a number of people. You get a snow event, and we haven't had big snow events, but we're stuck at home. Today is my first day out of my apartment in over a week. And thankfully, the sidewalks were clear enough for me to get out. I'm a big, strong guy, and yet still trying to struggle to get through the snow and the slush. We talk about an active city. We talk about an accessible city. We talk about an inclusive city. We talk about, even on the city's website, they talk about during a snow event, take public transit. Well, if I can't get 30 feet to the bus stop, okay, you're stopping me and many others from conducting their daily affairs. I recognize that there's going to be times when it would be silly for many of us to try and go out anyways. However, there is some expectation that we put some emphasis on snow clearing on the sidewalks as we do on city roads. We're in a climate emergency. We're encouraging active multimodal transportation, public transit, cycling, walking. Yes, I said cycling. What is it? They're not supposed to be on the sidewalks, but let's face it, given the lack of infrastructure, they are using our sidewalks. And I don't blame them. It's a safety thing. However, with the current snow removal policies, it's a problem, and it's also causing a lot of stress. And I don't think people completely understand that. Many of you know our good friend Cheryl Ruth. On Monday, a real struggle to get to where she needed to be due to snowbanks, and this is a couple of days after, or a day after the snow event. And she tweeted out, "I'm exhausted. Every damn day of my life is put at risk. Every winter I have to send polite emails to City Hall asking for people to do their jobs properly. This isn't an anomaly, this is consistent. I know going home tonight will mean climbing over snowbanks. So put yourself in a position where you have a disability, you're a walker, wheelchair, parents with strollers. And as Cheryl continues, she continues to say, I can't continue to live a life of anxiety, fear, and anger every time I have to walk somewhere in the city. I know the clearing roads is a priority. There's no arguing that. We have public transportation that we're really trying to promote. We have emergency services that need to get around. And I recognize that we're following provincial standards. However, okay, there needs to be some consistency as well. One day we have 5 centimeters of snow and the snow sidewalk plows are out. And the next day, or 2 days later, we get 10 centimeters and I have to be that pain that contacts City Hall to try and get this resolved. With the business case for lowering snowfall thresholds under consideration, prioritized at number 25, there's potential to see improvements. You guys are the budget masters. I know that you're turning over every stone that you can to try and find it. Based on the information that I've seen, we're talking about less than $5 a year to improve Councillor Lewis's motion to get these thresholds lowered. And I don't think that's out of line. I know folks don't want to spend any more money. I understand that. But we need to get around in this city. There are many, many options.
30 seconds.
There are many, many options, and I know that you're looking at it. I implore you to take this seriously. I'd like to thank Councillor Lewis for his hard work. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the community for the support for the petition, and I'd really like to thank you for your consideration in this matter, and I hope you put some thought into it and side with us accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaHaye. I believe there's a representative from the London Community Foundation on the floor. We'll go to you next. As a process improvement, at about 30 seconds, I'm going to stick up my hand just to give a signal, and I'll just keep it up until you make eye contact with me. If you are visually impaired and you'd like an audible signal, I'm happy to do that too. Just indicate that at the start of your comments. But I'll just do a visual signal at the 30-second mark to assist people to wrap up their comments. If you just want to turn on the microphone, there's a small button there. It's an on.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for hearing us. Just a little bit of background. The Back to the River Committee was formed back in 2015, and it's a partnership between the City of London, the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, the London Community Foundation. The purpose is to revitalize a 5-kilometer stretch of the Thames River, London's most important natural asset, and to encourage environmental sustainability, stimulate economic development, and enhance the quality of life for the whole community. Over the past 5 years, thousands of hours of staff and volunteer time have been dedicated to bringing forward the best possible plan. I want to thank the staff and volunteers from the community and through the London Community Foundation. I want to thank our partners at the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and I want to thank the City of London staff, many of whom are here, who've been involved with this plan over the past 5 years. So we thought there was a quote that was appropriate. Great cities can hold several things in mind at once. They can move forward to solve contemporary problems while also considering their heritage and future. Back to the River represents just such an opportunity not to be missed. So why Back to the River? Well, it's about the environment. It brings Londoners to the Thames River in a new attractive way and will raise an appreciation of the river. It addresses major shoreline erosion and instability at the forks. It's a design that keeps the structures out of the water, leaves the natural flow and the natural aspects of the river. It's a long-term plan to enhance the health of our river, and it's a place where place-based learning opportunities for all ages, schools, colleges, adults can all take advantage. It's about our Indigenous peoples, and we've had representatives from both within the city and from the neighboring the neighboring tribes. It's about giving respect and honor to the river's history and its connection to the Indigenous peoples, celebrating their history, the culture of the early settlement, originally Antler River. It complements the work being done by Museum London and the Indigenous Legacies Project. The Forks of the Thames was central in a route that linked Indigenous communities and facilitated trade in Upper Canada. It's about the economy. It will attract and complement new development in the downtown and along the river in the core. It'll create new business opportunities. I think we've already seen some of those. It provides a new venue to host major events in the core. It helps to increase economic vitality of the core and will add another layer of tourism attraction. It really will become a unique gem in the citywide park system. It's about revitalizing our core. It's a natural extension of all of the wonderful work done on Dundas Place and the new connection to the Thames Valley Trail. It's a natural, accessible public space for new residents and new workers. We're seeing the new residents arriving, and with the businesses, we're seeing the new workers. It complements other downtown attractions like Bud Gardens, the Covent Garden Market, and Museum London. It's consistent with the goals and priorities of the London Plan, and it's about embracing what we have and building on it. And it will provide opportunities for year-round activation and programming. So ideas of programming, and these are just some of many, many, many that have come through in our public engagement sessions. Walking trails, bike shares, canoeing and kayaking, lookouts, play spaces, arts and craft vendors, performance art, music, pop-up opportunities, things that can happen in a day or an afternoon or a few hours. It'll be there to complement the other festivals and events that take place in the core and on Dundas Place. It provides educational programming for public schools, high schools, colleges. And it'll be a center for Indigenous cultural activities, ethnic festivals, and the like. So just in business terms, you have the business case. I think you've all seen the business case for Back to the River. Just a couple of highlights. We certainly wanted to highlight that the London Community Foundation has increased our donor commitment from $2 million to $3 million. I think the last time we were in front of you, we had $2 million from 2 donors. We've now raised that to $3 million. We understand from the business case there's an additional capital budget of $3.6 million, so I think this is what we're talking about. We were pleased to see that it was recommended as a priority investment. The business case states no impact on the average tax levy, and there are contingencies built in. So I'll just quickly, these are just some examples of successes. Hamilton, Ontario, Saskatoon, Burlington, Ontario is very significant, limited investment, rates of opportunities.
That's your time.
Yes, okay.
I think we have a copy of your slides,
All right.
so we can flip through the rest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Levin next. We'll get your slides, and you can approach the podium. And again, I said your name, but you can state it at the start, although I think you know the drill.
Should be, yep. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. I wear a lot of hats, many of which you give to me that I get to wear, but today the only hat I'm wearing is citizen. I want that to be very clear. There's 4 things I want to outline, just because you've got a budget process to go through, so I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics. I'm just going to provide some examples and help in the thinking process. CPI is greater than CPI. Well, I'll get into why that math works. Linkages between projects, previously authorized but not issued, and trade-offs, climate and cost. What I mean by CPI is bigger than CPI is your staff have reported your construction price index has increased faster than the consumer price index. And as a municipality, the consumer price index isn't really all that relevant. It is to the people who pay taxes, of course, but your challenge is because the federal and provincial governments have been so helpful with infrastructure money, prices are going up because demand has gone up. There are many linkages between projects in your budget, and here's just one example. This comes from Part C of the Back to the River, that there's an environmental assessment schedule for 2023, and then later in page 429 of your detailed budget, there's a pedestrian bridge, which I think is the subject of that EA, which is, if approved, happens in 2020, the debenture gets authorized. Now, it's DC rate supported, or maybe later that's now known as the community improvement charge or community benefit charge under DC. But anyway, I'm highlighting that you've got an EA in 2023, but you're being asked to approve a project in your 2020 to 2023 budget. Then it disappears to a certain extent as authorized but not issued, and you've got $95 million of authorized but not yet started. Many of those will actually not be borrowed because you'll have cash available to avoid debt, but are they still priorities for this council? Can you cancel and use it for other projects? Something to think about, something to ask your staff about. And there's trade-offs, climate and costs. The climate impacts, new concrete. Cement's the key ingredient in concrete and has a massive carbon footprint. So when you build things. And interestingly, new sidewalks as an example, you're losing trees, you're creating operating costs, and you get new emissions from additional cleaning operations. So you have these wonderful trade-offs to make. And I just wanted to outline, as a citizen, some of the things to think about as you go forward in your process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes people who indicated they needed the floor or the slide decks. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the microphones up in the audience. I want to make just a couple of remarks while people are shifting around about the process. So there are 4 microphones. You're welcome to use whatever. I'm just going to kind of go around to each of them as we go through the process. I will let people know that there are 2 committee rooms on the 2nd floor that are being used as overflow rooms. As you can see, council chambers is pretty much full. There are people in those overflow rooms who would like to speak. So after you have spoken, if you could take the opportunity to go to one of those committee rooms, hear the council meeting and hear the discussion and hear what other members of the public are saying, that would make room for people in those rooms to come here and share their thoughts with council as well. And our staff at the doors are there to assist you in guiding you between those spaces. So I would ask kindly that once you have spoken, if you could make some space for others. As things become a little lighter at the end of the night, our staff will indicate for people in the overflow rooms that they can come and join us back in chambers if you want to stay the whole time. You're also welcome to go home if you want, and this is all being recorded. You can watch it all later from home. Yes, and we're going to have lots of time to go through stuff. Our staff do not want people really lining up on the stairs just for safety if you trip and bump someone down from the front. So I was asked to make that comment. There will be lots of time to get through everybody. So I'm going to start in the top, though. And again, state your name. I'll put up my hand for 30 seconds. I or the clerk if I miss it. And we'll just continue through the microphones. I'll just address people. So thank you very much for your patience. There'll be a lot of people speaking. I guess the one thing to remind everybody else is some people may say things that you really like. Some people may say things that you really don't like. We're here to respect everyone's opinion and listen to them, so there'll be no clapping or booing or anything like that. We're just going to listen to everybody's opinion respectfully and take that under consideration. And council will start debating this in a couple of weeks. So with that being said, sorry to put you on the spot, but you're first.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council. I'm assuming you didn't make that comment just because I'm speaking next, but I am Mike Wallace. I'm from LDI this evening, which is the London Development Institute. We're at 562 Wellington Street. And Council, you should know that if you haven't seen it yet, we sent you a letter today talking to you about this budget process. First of all, LDI agrees with your approach, that you're taking a multi-year approach to budgeting here in the city, and we appreciate the effort that's going into this, particularly with the challenges that you're facing with the changes in the funding from the province and some changes locally, including the land ambulance piece. I really want to make 2 or 3 points. First, when you are making your decision, try to keep in mind with things that you've been talking about. I've been at many of your meetings, and affordability and accessibility to the marketplace is one of them. And making this community accessible for all is important. So when you're making your decisions on what to do in terms of the budget, we hope you keep that in mind. And there has been an indication, not just for this community, but for others, of the infrastructure gap that is continuing to grow here at this community. And keep in mind what the decisions you're making in terms of where the funding is going and whether you're either adding or subtracting from that infrastructure gap. Overall, I've done a pretty good job of going through the budget. I want to thank your staff. Your financial staff for spending time with me to go over it. I attended an open house a week and a half ago or whenever it was. It was well attended, and the staff that were there were very, very, very helpful. The position of our organization is that, your 4-year average is 4.5%, but your first year increase is 6%. Of that 4.5, that's a 6% increase for next year. That's fairly significant. Our hope that you do your best to get it down to somewhere in the 3.2 range, where that would include the additional costs that you're facing due to the changes from the province and from Land Ambulance. We recognize that, but we just believe that 6% in 1 year is a fairly significant increase, and that if there needs to be, we don't envy you, to be honest with you, some real review of what is possible and what is required. And one area that your treasurer won't like, but I'm going to speak to, is one area where I think you need to look. I think you need a policy on your reserves, and not your reserves that you have to have. Like I'm talking about the more on the discretionary side. You're moving from $420 million to $475 million in 4 years. That's net. That's after the spending that you have planned comes out of there. You will still have almost $500 million in the bank after your spending plans are there. In our view, you need a plan to say, okay, when a reserve is enough, and we take the money that could be going there and spending it on either tax reductions or on programs. And I'll just give you, the $6 million is 1%. So instead of having a 13% increase over 4 years, if you cut that in half, if you took 25 million out of that, and you went to 450 million in over 4 years, and that other 26 million you used to reduce the tax rate or put it in affordable housing, whatever you want to do with it, I think there's opportunity there. We think there's opportunity there to look at a policy for the city about when enough is enough and still keep your AAA credit rate. You are going to hear that because of the savings you have, that's why you have a AAA rating. That is one reason why you have a AAA rating, and it's part of it. But I challenge you to get an answer on what else goes into that and what the effect would be of taking 25 million, I'm using that as an example, and using it for current, because the money's coming from tax-supported money, using it for other purposes. That's a suggestion. Thank you for your time, and good luck.
Thank you. Next microphone.
Okay. So thank you for having me. I'm Shauna Lukowitz, and today I'm speaking as the president of the Urban League of London and the priorities of our board. And these priorities are not necessarily the priorities of our members. As an organization who recognizes the importance of healthy, sustainable, and inclusive communities as the foundation of well-being of its residents, we want to speak to the importance of investing in strong and healthy neighborhoods. So in general, we support the business cases in the budget related to culture and the environment, and we stand with organizations and individuals in London calling for the full support of these cases, and we add our voice and support to their efforts. But for our time today, what we want to speak to specifically is the need for the city to invest aggressively in housing and poverty initiatives. In the London Plan, it states that a strong and healthy neighborhood is where all members of the community have access to housing that is safe, secure, and suitable to their needs and ability to pay. Unfortunately, this is not the case right now. London has a housing crisis that is only growing and will continue to grow. We do commend city administration and council for prioritizing housing and poverty reduction in this four-year budget and in many of the business cases being brought forward for further investment. So here's a snapshot of what London is facing. 45% of tenant households in London spend 30% or more of their monthly gross income on rent. The vacancy rate for London is about 2%. The wait list for social housing has grown over 70% in the last 2 years, leaving over 500,000 people on the wait list for housing. Current projections will not see that number shrink, but instead continue to rise. There are approximately 2,400 individuals and families in London accessing emergency shelters each year. These are hugely significant problems that the city and larger community have spent considerable effort putting together plans to address. And again, we commend these efforts and feel optimism for the possibilities of what is being planned. But if we want to see the outcomes of those plans have the intended impact, Council will need to fully invest in the solutions being put forward. Complex systemic problems are not solved by incremental change. What does work is courageous leadership willing to make the necessary investments to back identified needs and solutions. That's why the Urban League of London Board supports all the prioritized business cases relating to housing and homelessness. And in addition, we strongly support the inclusion and prioritization of the following cases listed for consideration. Business case number 10, which is HDC funding for affordable housing Part B, because the bottom line is we need more affordable housing, much more. And city staff have identified that the housing gap is set to increase based on population growth, demographics, income, and economic changes, and the loss of more affordable private rental units. If we don't want that gap to increase, we will need to build more affordable units. We support business case number 18, LMCH and CMHC co-investment. This investment supports co-investment funding under the National Housing Strategy to repair and renew existing LMCH public housing stock. And due to the age and lack of infrastructure investments, our community housing stock has degraded, which has led to mold, insect, and rodent infestations and generally unhealthy living conditions for residents. Healthy, clean housing should be prioritized, and this co-investment fund allows the city to leverage funding for buildings to be repaired and renewed while also becoming energy efficient and environmentally sustainable. Business case number 19, LMCH operating costs. This investment is intended to support the operational improvements around staffing and security in LMCH. All London residents deserve affordable, safe housing, and tenants living in community housing are no different. To address the needs and security of tenants, the city must provide the appropriate funds for LMCH to do their jobs well. Safe and secure housing benefits not just tenants, but surrounding neighborhoods and all of London. And lastly, number 21, regeneration of public housing. This strategy is vitally important because it addresses a substantial need for affordable housing in the city and utilizes regeneration of existing sites to increase the suitability and availability of affordable housing. It is this kind of creative strategy that is necessary if we're going to address our housing gap. We recognize Council has numerous budget considerations and that in prioritizing new investments, administration has attempted to spread the support around. We support the majority of business cases being put forward, particularly around climate crisis initiatives. In addition, in order for the people in our city to thrive, the most basic thing they need is adequate shelter. To fulfill that need, we need to move past incremental change and fully fund the substantial and effective plans put in place to address the housing crisis. The problem will only grow if we don't, and it will be the people in our neighborhoods, communities who will continue to suffer. As the board of the Urban League of London, we thank staff and council for their commitment to providing safe, secure, healthy, and affordable housing for all. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you. This microphone at the bottom.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is William Pohl. I'm a professor of the Bachelor of Environmental Design and Planning program at Fanshawe College. For the past 5 years, I've had the privilege to participate in the Back to the River community building project. This process is really an important example of city building to my students and to other communities across Ontario. A couple of times a year, I bring my students down to the Forks of the Thames to discuss how London has built and improved the downtown. We have a lively downtown. Investments in Budweiser Gardens, Covent Garden Market, and even the new Fanshawe College downtown campus has brought more and more people to the Forks. People are coming there. Now we need a reason for them to stay. I actually have a quote about staying at the Forks from a famous urban planner architect, Jan Gehl. Jan Gehl's firm was actually the firm that helped design our own Dundas Place. And the quote, "A good city is like a good party. The guests stay because they're enjoying themselves. We want them to stay and enjoy themselves at the Forks. And to do so, it must be beautiful, meaningful, and pleasant to make a memorable impression." So Back to the River gives people a beautiful view from the ribbon outlook along the Thames to the west, south, and north branches. You'll be able to look back towards the London skyline. The views show respect for our natural environment. It celebrates our thriving downtown. The view changes from daybreak to sunset, from season to season, creating a memorable London experience. The Back to the River project gives people meaningful experience for all ages, all abilities, all backgrounds. It will become an important place for people to meet, to celebrate, to entertain, and give access to the river. All cultures, ages, and backgrounds are welcome. Specific emphasis has been given to our Aboriginal peoples in the area. The Forks will surprise our sights, sounds, and feel of a space through these improvements. And finally, the Back to the River gives people a pleasant place to stay and enjoy. It's going to offer quiet places to talk and relax, shady places and sunny places, flexible places that each person can make their own. These changes will invite us to the Forks, invite us to stay. It will contribute to city building by elevating the Forks from a good place to an iconic London symbol. I'm looking forward to bringing my friends, my relatives, and yes, my urban planning students back to the Forks after the BRT, Back to the River improvements are made, to stay, experience, and create new, meaningful memories of London. I'm asking the committee to continue your city building by recommending to Council the Back to the River Budget 2020 to 2023 request as recommended by staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if you're looking to use the microphone at the top or not, but someone could use the upper one if they like.
Hello, is this on?
Yeah, it's on. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bob Morrison. I live in Wellington Street North, Ward 6. I'm here today to voice support for actions on our climate crisis. I'll start off by saying that I support business cases 5A and 5B on the Climate Emergency Declaration. I support the subsidized transit business case and rapid transit projects that make public transit an efficient and desired transportation option. I support greater winter maintenance of sidewalks and bus shelters. They're important for things like first and last mile of public transit trips, year-round active transportation, aging in place, mobility for persons with disabilities. I also support affordable housing funding and request that they include energy retrofits or when creating new housing that they're above the current energy efficiency standards, creating spaces to live and thrive. Climate action is for the common good. It increases equity for its citizens. These business cases are good steps forward and they should get funding. However, when I look at the base budget, it seems like it's business as usual. Yesterday, the mayor gave his State of the City speech, and he stated that making LTC buses zero emission is one of the single most impactful things we can do as a city to achieve a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions. I fully support zero emission LTC buses and hope this can be completed in a reasonable time frame. However, I'd argue that an extremely impactful thing that influences citywide emissions already lies in the base budget. It just happens to impact it in the wrong way. The city holds large levers to influence the greatest greenhouse gas emission source in the city. That is personal vehicles. Personal vehicles represent about 30% of London's combined emission inventory. London's base budget continues to prioritize car vehicle travel above all other modes of transportation. To widen and expand a road system is establishing a decade of emission growth exactly at a point where we need to dramatically decrease our emissions. Planned road projects emphasize continued development at our urban growth boundaries. It makes it more expensive to deliver services like transit and protective services. Development charges do not come close to covering these expenses, nor even try to account for related emissions. Now you might think to yourself, well, he doesn't understand the complexities of the Ontario Development Charges Act. He doesn't understand the complexities of DC background studies or the Transportation Master Plan. You might think, oh, he doesn't understand the complexity of moving forward before the appeals for the London Plan have been cleared up. You're right, I probably don't understand all those details. However, I have some hope. There is scientific consensus that we have 10 years to dramatically make a difference, to allow our children and grandchildren to have a lifestyle somewhat similar to our own. So I hope you truly believe that we are at a defining moment where history will judge us. I hope you believe that actions by individual municipalities collectively add to something greater. I hope you believe these things, because if you did, then you would act in this budget. I hope you proceed with rapid transit projects, but defer all other growth road widening projects that are tied to development charges. Keep the money in the reserve funds until you can change what needs to be changed. Take other discretionary spending and create a climate emergency reserve fund. Find the solutions. I hope you do not choose a business as usual base budget. I hope you do act on climate emergency now and make the base budget a true reflection of the vision of the city that all residents deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the top over here.
Penny Moore, and I wear many hats, and one of is on Accessibility Advisory Committee, Transportation Advisory Committee, but today I'm just a regular citizen like everybody else today. I'm here to talk about specialized on transit is very important to me. I miss programs that I'm in, my arts, my theater, my community involvement at City Hall, and that because I can't get bookings. I could spend an hour to 2 hours on the phone and can't get bookings. Last month, I could not get out because I couldn't get to my doctor's appointments or even my treatments at the hospital. Also, that goes along with specialized transit is last year I talked about accessible taxis. And the available taxi plates were increased from 19 to 29, but only one of those extra 10 were applied for, because I hear that from taxi drivers and that there's no program in to help them. And looking at other cities, I hope you continue to look into other programs to make us more accessible. Also, housing is another problem. We need more accessible housing, and the London housing that was passed down, a lot of them are old age housing, and they're not wheelchair accessible. So we need more wheelchair accessible housing, and a lot of people that are waiting are aging. The seniors and that need adaptable housing, especially if they're in low-income housing. A lot of them will be there for about 10, 15 years. So by the time at the end of 20 years, they may be in a wheelchair. Also, there was the law about cannabis smoking was passed, and it was a bylaw that was passed where they could smoke was only in areas that were smoking was allowed. We need better signage and better enforcement of that. Thank you for letting me talk to you, and I know budget season is not easy, and there's only very little money to go around. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to this microphone next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Morgan. My name is Chris Butler from 863 Waterloo Street. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that are unique or more unique to London that should give a little bit of guidance to council on a very difficult job going forward. One is London has a more senior population than most centers. 17% of us are 65 or older. That's about 78,000 of our current registry. 46% of us own a home,
And unfortunately, the rub is 13 to 14% of those folks that are senior and own a home are actually living on or below the poverty line. Not the new poverty line is coming up, but in around the $17,000 after taxes. Very difficult to pay taxes after that. If you combine that with what you see with millenniums, who generally don't have $150 at the end of the bank or the end of the month to choose to where to spend that, we're running out of our capacity to tax. We're not running out of our capacity to choose, we're running out of our capacity to tax. The second thing that London has somewhat uniqueness in, we're the 6th largest city in Ontario, but we place 25th in our mill rate in terms of our taxes. It doesn't matter what assessed value you are, around the 250, which is average here, or the average, the 500 or whatever, we're 25th highest in Ontario. And I think that we should be getting some synergies with a city this size. So that's something to look forward to in terms of leadership going forward, and basically in what we do as a council for that, because right now, those two aren't at odds. The third thing I'd like to say, and I've done a little research on this, I've gone to the budget meetings, I've looked at other city budgets. London seems to have a monopoly on what it takes to have, to maintain existing services. We're told constantly at budget meetings it's 2.5, 2.6. Other cities I see are in the range of 1.8 to 2.1. We're down to margins here. I was at a budget meeting last year, and one of the councilors asked that question, and I think it needs to be re-asked so that we have some opportunities to take those funds and move them elsewhere for some choices this council has to make. So just a couple things in terms of the challenges that I'd like to see council set rather than individual programs. Like the gentleman that was up here a couple of times before, I'd like to see the bump on the front end smooth for the first couple of years. There are a lot of ways, I think, to do that. But the way I look at it is programs are a deck of 52 cards. If you want a new program, take one of the cards out, put it on the 40% off sale on the rack over there, and let that program go, because we do have some choices. And I think that this council can do that. I was here at a July 29th meeting. I would suggest if we look at doing that, we ask for more of the city's help than involve council in each councilor picking any individual thing. That meeting didn't work out very well at all, even though there were some awesome suggestions that came out of that meeting. So I think another example too, as I see Jay down there, I was at the budget meeting. I asked Jay one simple question. I said, if we delay the green bin program 1 year from its current budget outlook, would we be any compliance issues? Jay said, I wouldn't recommend it, but we would not be in a compliance issue for the 1 year. We have to do some things to smooth the bump and ask some simple questions. The third thing is, I think our 4-year budget opportunity really offers an opportunity for this council to give something to everybody in this room and to yourselves going forward, because it's multi-generational. We have a little program, and I'll call it very little. It's called the Service Improvements Program, where the city comes with 0.15% of the operating budget and gives it back to you every year as $1 million in savings. The $1 million in savings is usually cost avoidance. I'd like council to look at, during this 4-year budget session, to bump that up to 2.5 million, which would be 0.5% of the operating budget. I've been involved in continuous improvements programs my whole life. I've never had one of them that's involved with less than 2.5%. We are at training steps now with the city. I'd like us to move to baby steps at 2.5 million a year, and that'll pay us forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a reminder, when my hand or the clerk's hand goes up, that's the 30-second mark. You can keep going, but that's the time to start thinking about wrapping up. So, your turn.
My name is Jen. I'm from La Academy de la Tamage, and I think the climate change is really important because my school was very worried, and I think putting money toward that is a good choice.
Thanks for making me try to enforce the no clapping rule. We'll go to the upper deck. If you need some assistance getting the microphone down, we can help you out with that. It will come off.
Thank you for your time. I just would like to echo my voice as well on the snow clearing issue. Um, everyone knows, there is a massive population in London of persons with disability. As myself, the Cherry Hill apartment area is full of that as well. And I just would like to say that there's many of us who are in the community, and all of us, we are all in the community. We are no different than anybody else. Some of you are able to traverse the sidewalks when there's snow and ice. And for us, it is much more difficult because of the ice. I have actually, on the way here, I live up in the White Hills area. I was coming up Lawson Road, just near Wilfrid Jury Public School, and I was slipping and sliding. There's a bunch of ice up there. And I just want to let everybody know that, like, clear sidewalks are very important for not just the disabled population, but for everybody's safety. So I would like to put out a message for everyone to clear your sidewalk. And this is not something for a specific population in London, like the disabled. It's for everyone. So just sorry. I would like to say that every single part of the city needs to be clean, no matter if it's downtown, south end, north end, east, west. All of it needs to be clean, so for all of us to be able to get to work, to school, to recreational places like shopping malls, movie theaters, anywhere. So thank you.
And we just didn't catch your name at the start?
It's Peter Pollution. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go up to the top on this side.
Andrew McClanagan, president of Digital Echidna, and recently elected chair of Downtown London. I am joined today by Don McCallum, president of Tricom Software Inc. and chair of Main Street London, as well as many of our fine LDBA team members. Downtown London was given the opportunity to make an additional funding request via the multi-year budget process. I am here today on behalf of our members to bring to council a plan for the Downtown London organization to enhance a variety of recommendations that have been put forward in the core area action plan. I should quickly note that while we have not yet had an opportunity to review this proposal in any great detail with Scott Stafford and his team, we expect to get further into the weeds in the near future to identify any additional synergies and further savings that can be realized. The focus of our proposal is on items that specifically align to the existing programs, resources, and contributions of the London Downtown Business Association and Main Street London. Prior to outlining our plan, I wish to acknowledge the number of agenda items today in support of housing solutions. We also acknowledge and advocate for affordable, supportive housing solutions to address our city's issues related to addiction, mental health, and homelessness, which various levels of government and other local organizations are working tirelessly to implement. We advocate for solutions to these issues as an important part of strengthening the core area and, most importantly, helping our fellow citizens. While housing is not our direct mandate, we strongly support the recommendations to address the community's needs. That said, our Downtown London mandate is my focus today. I'll cut to the chase as we have just a few minutes to tell you about our proposal, how it aligns with your plan, and how we can move forward together. Upon reviewing the core area action plan, we looked at existing programs for LDBA and Main Street to see where we could find synergies with the plan. As identified in our base budget for 2020, Downtown London and our members have planned to invest over $436,000 in activities that directly align with your core area action plan. I am proud to say we are doing our part as key stakeholders in the core. With additional funding, we can expand our programming to deliver more impact towards the goals of the city's action plan. Our request is broken down as follows. First, for the LDBA, referencing core action plan items. Items 44 and 45, we're requesting funds to increase the range and intensity of programming and activations happening in the downtown core. 46, 47, and 60, we're looking for additional investments in projection art, infrastructure art, and public art in the core. Item 25, additional funds allocated to expand our already existing Super Guide Ambassador program, as well as the Clean Team. Next up, Main Street is focusing on its efforts on leveraging our existing programming and experience, which should give the city optimal value. It's all about collaboration, cooperation, and best and most efficient use of our collective resources. Referencing again the core action plan items 12 and 30, we're requesting funds for additional training for members, specifically related to de-escalation, conflict management, and needle recovery. Items 16, 31, and 63, increasing incentives for facades, including uplighting for business owners, pop-up patio pilot, decorative gates and alleys. Item 40, enhancing our recruitment efforts with a shipping container pop-up shop. In summary, our member investment for 2020 will be $436,000. Our additional funding request is $412,000. Leveraging our existing programming and experience should give you the best return on your investment. Approving our request would also signal a very balanced public-private partnership in addressing core needs. Overall, it's our belief that this proposal can have a multiplying effect, and we encourage the council to leverage our expertise and talented staff in implementing the core area action plan. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Lower microphone.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. My name is Abe Outsor. I want to start by thanking you all for hearing community concerns about housing. This issue has been a priority for many of us for years, even decades, and we're pleased to see the whole community now getting behind this issue, and we see you doing the same. Over the past year, my research on housing and homelessness has taken me to communities across Canada, to places like Belfast, Northern Ireland, and New York City. I've been listening closely to experiences of other communities, places like New York who've tried everything imaginable about housing and started it 50 years before we ever did. And I've been comparing those to what we're experiencing now and thinking about what we need to do. And more than ever, I'm convinced that housing is the solution for homelessness, which is nothing particularly new or surprising. However, I've also been learning more and more about what we need to think about in terms of two distinct approaches to making housing work for London's most vulnerable: affordable housing and social housing. Affordable housing is absolutely a solution for so many low-income Londoners, as housing markets continue to incentivize higher rents and development of upscale units. So because of that, I ask of you to invest in affordable housing through the HDC, taking full advantage of opportunities from the provinces and from the feds. However, affordable housing at 90% of average market rent, or 80%, or even at 70%, which is a depth we don't do much anymore, is still out of reach for many of our most vulnerable. And this is where social housing comes in. This is the second tool in your toolbox that you already have. The rent geared to income social housing provided through London Middlesex Community Housing is the foremost option for exits from homelessness to housing currently in existence in our community. That rent geared to income is the thing that works for those who are on Ontario Works income. In fact, this is the only option for many. I'm looking forward to rental supplements coming from the National Housing Strategy. There's another potential opportunity there. So it's vital, because of the importance of social housing, that we repair and expand our social housing stock. A regeneration process that intensifies existing LMCH properties, replaces old stock with new, is a tool that's being used by communities around the world, across Canada, and right here in Ontario. We only have to look at places like Toronto and Peterborough to see incredible things that you can do by leveraging the value of the properties we have in social housing to replace with bigger, better, newer spaces for more people to have access to RGI units. However, to get there involves committing funds now. And there are asks in your business cases to do that. And so I ask of you desperately, on behalf of our neighbors, our friends, and our family members who are sleeping unsheltered in London tonight, to invest fully in all housing business cases, priority and otherwise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lower microphone.
And those who live.
Could you just start over? We didn't have the mic quite on for you at the start there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ken Taylor, and thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here to speak about issues concerning London and Middlesex community housing, specifically maintenance. Maintenance in London housing buildings has been sliding. There is no full-time people in any of the buildings. And the buildings are basically in a state of disrepair. The plumbing is bad. The plumbing is bad. No full-time maintenance staff. Current tenants are living in terrible conditions with mold conditions, aging plumbing, poor ventilation, poor heating, drafty windows, and regular issues with infestations such as cockroaches, bed bugs, and mice. Maintenance and repairs can take months to years to complete if they're done at all. In my experience, my issues with maintenance and pest control started about 3 years ago when I had a bed bug infestation that had to be addressed. I reported the bed bugs, and I had several bed bug treatments over a 6-month period. Eventually, pest control advised me that it was necessary to take off the baseboards, window trim, and remove my couch in order to treat properly. They did these things, but removing the couch left a hole in my wall, and they cut a hole in the ceiling in my bedroom as part of the pest control process. Housing promised that these things would be fixed and replaced once my unit was cleared of pests. The treatment worked and housing cleared my unit. I have had work orders in place to fix these things, but it's been over 3 years and I'm still living with no baseboards, no window trim in my bedroom, hole in my bedroom ceiling, and a hole in my wall. Because of this, there's a big draft in my bedroom, which at night means that I have to turn up my heat in order to stay warm and put an extra blanket on my bed. We need better investment in this area. It would make a huge difference to have more maintenance staff available and on site. These things cannot be fixed without enough staff to do the work. Right now, the city has put a lot of pressure on turning around vacant units, but this means that tenants already in the buildings have even longer waits for maintenance service than normal. Our needs have not changed, but the maintenance staff are working on other areas, and there are not enough of them to keep up with the work. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Upper microphone.
Yes, hi. I'm here speaking on behalf of 241 Simcoe Street and public housing in general. I live there. I experience it daily, and it's not good. London Housing, for example, has 33 buildings and not one full-time maintenance staff for any of those buildings. Also, we don't have security. There is no security at all for these buildings, especially since 241 lives downtown. We're right downtown. We're on the edge of Horton. I know we're south of Horton, but, we still matter. And a lot of us feel like we don't matter. A lot of people are tired of living in such crummy conditions. My friend, for example, had to live with heating her house by oven. She had to turn on her oven and leave it on to heat her house because there was no maintenance available to fix her apartment because there's no money in it and the staff was elsewhere. Now, recently, we've had some fixes and some increase in security. For example, we do have security at night, but that's out of the goodness of London Housing. They don't have the money for it. It's $15,000 per security guard per month. And they need more money to go towards security to keep people safe because there's been assaults, there's been verbal threats made to the residents, and I know of elderly people that are some of the most vulnerable refuse to leave their homes because it is not safe where we live. This needs to be addressed. I myself am lucky because I'm in one of the decent units, but most people in that building aren't so lucky. 241 Simcoe needs your help. And so does, the rest of public housing. I'm sure it's not any better. Thank you.
Sure, and if you're comfortable with sharing your name, we could add that to the record.
Eve.
Thank you. Top microphone.
Thompson from the London Advocates Network. We're a group of over 50 organizations that come together to address issues of poverty reduction in our community. We deal with people who are in receipt of Ontario Works and ODSP, and therefore we are the experts that come to you and plead you to deal with some of the issues that people are dealing with in our communities. We understand that there's constraints in the budget and you're trying to figure this out for the next 4 years. And in fact, we've pointed out in our submission to you that there's 6 social assistance cuts that you're going to have to deal with that the province is downloading onto you as well. But we have some London-specific issues that we feel are important to deal with poverty reduction. The first one is the transportation. There's a number of transportation pilot projects that make the transportation in London more accessible to groups of people that need the support. Those pilot projects are coming to an end, so we're asking you to make them permanent. The second issue that we've been here a few times about is affordable housing in our community. We did a Freedom of Information request that showed that only 214 units were created between 2014 and 2019, plus one house with 4 bedrooms in it. And that means 8 people were provided supportive housing. Last year, you dissolved the budget that did away with the policies, the bylaw, that said that the affordable housing dollars for London needed 50% to go to supportive housing. That didn't happen, and when it was dissolved, you didn't put a replacement policy in place either. So now we have a crisis. The event at Silverwood this year highlighted the need for affordable and subsidized housing in our community. And while the event raised community awareness of the need for solutions to the housing crisis, additioning housing supplements would go a long way in getting people housed immediately. Other housing policies have not been implemented that direct growth and development to include affordable housing. The federal government's making more money available, so London needs to get to know what the housing policies are. You guys need to know what those housing policies are to address the gaps and set proactive directions, not just to deal with the problems generated in the past. London has an exceptionally high child poverty rate, and the 5,300 people on the waiting list for affordable housing includes families with children. Do you know how many affordable units were built in the past 5 years to house families with children? 0. London needs to use a gender lens when developing policies, as most of the sole support parents in London are headed by women. The business cases presented do nothing to house families in our community. The budget before council includes 6 plans in the area of housing, with 3 of them being prioritized. We submit that all 6 be prioritized and included in the final 4-year budget. That being said, some of the business plans raise concerns among some of our advocates. For example, the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan. We need to define clearly in your policies how many units you are going to create and what the level of affordability is. It's been said before tonight that just below market rent is not considered affordable, and it doesn't house most of the families in need of housing in our community. Business case number 6, the coordinated informed response. Some view this as just moving homeless people from one area of the city to the other. This plan would be much more beneficial if housing supplements were part of this business case. More housing supplements was noted as a priority in the London for All recommendations. We submit that if you want to consider this as an investment in housing, at least half of this budget should be targeted towards providing housing supplements. The Community Advocates Network submits that the 4-year budget include funds for more housing supplements. Business case 18, the London Middlesex Housing Co-Investment with CMHC. We're concerned that the townhouse property should only be considered for building family units. These are family sites, And if you're going to increase the housing on those sites, please make sure that they are family units and those overlap with environmental goals. And in community consultations regarding the 5-year housing plans, many agencies, especially those that actually build or intend to build affordable housing units, real affordable housing units, we recommend that the HDC process get the projects up and running, simplify the process, and get it streamlined. Council needs to review the affordable housing targets and get back on track, supporting the building of real affordable housing in London, supporting, not hindering. And we want to know what happened to the Home Ownership Reserve Fund. Please get that out into the documents that we can see. The Coles Notes budget doesn't really help us keep track of
Thank
where
you.
things are going. Thank you.
Thank you. Lower microphone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine Dunn, and I'm the Vice President of the University Students' Council at Western University. I am here today on behalf of the 35,000 undergraduate and professional students at Western to support a number of existing services and new business cases that support transit, sustainability, and safety in the City of London. Western students are important members of the London community that are often overlooked, and they are essential stakeholders in decisions that affect the city beyond Western's property. The vast majority of our students live off campus, around the city, and work, volunteer, shop, and play at local businesses, nonprofits, and public spaces. Our students contribute over $350 million to the London economy in direct spending every single year, so their voices are critical in key decisions around the municipal budget. As the official elected representative of Western students, our involvement in this budgeting process is critical. First and foremost, the USC supports the London Transit Commission's inclusion in the base levy. Our students contribute over $7 million every single year to fund the LTC budget, with our mandatory bus fee levied on every undergraduate student. I would wager that many people in the room today do not regularly rely on public transit to travel within the city. Some of you may never have taken the bus at all. However, tens of thousands of post-secondary students and many vulnerable members of our community, as noted earlier here tonight, solely rely on the LTC every single day to travel between where they live, study, work, and play, connecting students to the places they spend tens of millions of dollars every single year. Already, hundreds of students are left on the side of the road daily as full buses pass by. That happened to me 3 times this morning on my way to work. The transit system cannot take any more cuts to existing services. As such, we urge City Council to prioritize all funding requests from the LTC and ensure improved service for the entire London community. If LTC were to receive anything less than the proposed 5.9% increase, we would experience a spiral effect of cuts to service and fare increases that could reverse any progress we've made on transit in the past few years. Make no mistake, transit is the USC's #1 priority, and as Mayor Holder said on Wednesday morning, the cost of inaction will outweigh the cost of the investment being proposed. Over the past year, the USC has engaged in numerous conversations with students across our campus about the issue of climate change. As young people, we are concerned about our future. Over the past 2 decades, we have seen greenhouse gas emissions rise by more than 50%, and as each day passes, we are met with increasingly concerning news about the deterioration of our planet. I'm from Newfoundland originally, so I'm really feeling these impacts now. To protect our community, the USC is supporting Business Case 1, the 60% Waste Diversion Action Plan, and Business Cases 5A and 5B, the development and implementation of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. Next, I want to urge City Council to adopt Business Case 23, the Streetlight Local Improvement Program. We need dedicated funding to implement your commitment to create a safe London for women and girls, and investing in streetlights is one way to do so. Our female students consistently tell us that they feel unsafe around the city at night when they're walking due to a lack of sufficient lighting, and this investment would be a step in the right direction to keep women and girls safe throughout London and show that there is a gender analysis being used in this budget. We also support Business Case 25, the Winter Maintenance Program support, which will significantly improve safety for students traveling to and from campus. We specifically support the prioritization of plowing bike lanes, sidewalks, and bus stops in near campus neighborhoods and across the city in recognition of the fact that tens of thousands of young people travel by bike, foot, and bus every single year, as well as our students that have accessibility needs. And finally, we want to affirm our support for cycling and support the expansion of the All Ages Ability Network by 40 kilometers, as well as hiring a cycling manager to ensure that we are prioritizing safe cycling and walking around our city. At our monthly USC meeting last night, 48 student leaders representing every undergraduate and professional faculty at Western unanimously endorsed each of these requests included in my speech today. These are the priorities of 35,000 Londoners that the USC represents, and as you have heard from throughout the other speeches tonight, that includes other groups in the city, such as the Accessibility Advisory Committee, the London Environmental Network, and London Cycle Link. As always, we encourage you to reach out to your student constituents and the USC when discussing any major decision at your council table tonight. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Lower microphone.
Mr. Chair and councillors. My name is Anita Caveney. My address is 46 Kings Park Crescent, London, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Nature London regarding an item in the 2020 capital budget. The project title is PH2, Replacement and Relocation of the Fire Training Tower located at 746, which is located on the east side of Wellington Road, adjacent to the Westminster Ponds, Pond Mills environmentally significant area. In your capital budget, this fire training tower is due for replacement and relocation in 2023 after several years of delay, and I think it's something in the range of about 10 years delay. Your staff have pointed out in the project detail record that potential increased usage of the ESA will reduce the viability of the tower. We ask that you move it to the 2020 capital budget. The fire department has been pouring water into the ESA during extension ladder fire hose practices, originally with the jet of water directed into the middle of the field on the east side of the fire tower, and then changing the direction of the jet in the past 2 years into a wooded area with a depression that is within this ESA and is situated southeast of the fire tower. In late 2017, Nature London raised concerns about potential undermining by the jet of a new granular pathway in the ESA that the city had just constructed in its new restoration area between the Tourist Information Building and Dearness Home. Excuse me. Hence, the fire department's decision in 2018 to direct the water jet away from the new path. Nature London feels that this fire hose training activity is not appropriate in an ESA and requests that Council 1 move forward the relocation of the fire training tower to 2020 from 2023, and 2, that the site chosen for the replacement fire training tower should not be adjacent to any environmentally significant area or other part of London's natural heritage system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Upper microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Tom McClanagan, citizen of London, with a sometime association with a group called Friends of the Cove Subwatershed, Inc. And some of you will be aware that to date, 20 years of effort, we've contributed almost $1 million for the restoration of the coves. So we're rather familiar with the river and water quality and lack thereof. But I do want to remind you that every history of London begins on the same date, and it's March the 2nd, 1793. It's the arrival of the first governor of Upper Canada in the coves, oddly enough. And he spent approximately a day and a half in the area and was very, very impressed with the site of this city. As a matter of fact, he recommended that it become the capital of Upper Canada. So what's happened since? Well, I guess number one, we've got a record of some of the comments that he's made, not from his own personal hand, but by virtue of Major John Littlehales, who kept a diary and wrote down what the governor was thinking. So we know a little bit about what his hopes were. One of his hopes, and this is not mentioned by Major Littlehales, his hope was for the river itself. He doesn't mention anywhere that indeed we would use it as a sewer. And we've done that for 200 years. Should stop. And we now have a bright, shining hope relative to back to the river. And the London Community Foundation has spent a significant amount of time and treasure in bringing it to the point where it currently rests. My hope is that this will be supported by this council. It's the beginning of a solution to a problem that has really bothered me for many, many years. And I used to look forward, particularly during the 50s and 60s, to Merrill Tingley. He always had a cartoon in the London Free Press about how much the river smelled. So let's hope that we'll move forward with Back to the River. I have great hopes for it. And I'd like to thank Councillor Turner for his effort to increase the funding for pipe separation within the city. 17 kilometers left to do. You could almost see the end. Thanks, Councillor Turner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Upper microphone on this side.
My name is Marianne Hodge. I live at 310 Wolf Street. Increasingly, we are seeing the devastation of the climate emergency. What used to be thought of as a concern for far-off developing countries has now reached Canada. The polar ice is melting, severe storms are hitting our coasts, and our winters fluctuate between extreme cold alerts and flood warnings. The Army on Tuesday noted that they are worried that the frequency of crisis intervention is disrupting the military's ability to be action-ready. Climate change touches everything, yet we often feel helpless to make a meaningful impact. When asked what would be the one action I would want the city to do, I found it a tough question because we cannot look at this as a single issue. So if there was one action I would support, business case 5A and 5B as a start, as the climate emergency initiatives. It is common knowledge, though, what needs to be done to limit global warming, yet it's not common for cities to act. Herein lies the opportunity for London. We are often considered the test market for the country. We need to start today to invest in the priorities that drive us forward rather than support the infrastructure that has created this emergency. Business is starting to act. Microsoft announced their intention to be carbon negative. Amazon has their climate pledge, and now BlackRock will be divesting of its fossil fuel investments. We are witnessing money and power moving away from the status quo. London needs to embrace this paradigm shift. I implore Council to find a new vision for London, a place where people can feel confident that we have the necessary infrastructure to meet the challenges of the next 10 years, to build an infrastructure that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and embraces energy efficiency. Past generations have built the highways, the railway, and the social safety net that unifies our country. We have the opportunity to build a vibrant city that addresses the needs for a low-carbon future. Please do not approve projects that will increase our dependence on polluting practices like road widening, but invest in the things that move us forward. A city that supports all forms of active transportation, like public transit, cycling, and walking. A city that ensures homes are built or renovated to new energy efficiency standards so that heating and cooling our homes does not become a burden. A city that deals with its waste prudently and stops procrastinating on the green bin program. A city that looks for every opportunity to make its footprint lighter, like the mayor's proposal to electrify the London Transit fleet. A city that builds social housing that is the most energy efficient to run, keeping operating costs and climate impacts low. Where do we find the money? We need to begin by differentiating between the wants and the needs in this budget, focusing on emergencies. London is full of practical and frugal people trying to get the most value from money spent, thinking long-term, not short-term. Like wartime efforts, the wants need to take a back seat to the needs. A future-thinking city will be more attractive to industry and residents, and many new construction jobs will be created in the process. It takes time to build green infrastructure, so we need to start now. With this council and with this budget, act now. Thank you.
Thank you. Lower microphone.
Hello, my name is Jess Spotto, and I'd like to speak a little in support of a composting green bin program in London. I was born and raised in London, Ontario, and I've spent the last decade split between Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Victoria, BC, both of which have citywide composting programs in place. Having recently returned to London, I'm shocked to see that this green initiative has still not been implemented in what we call the Forest City. Personally, I feel awful putting food waste in the garbage bins in London, and it's a shame that so much food waste gets sent to landfills every day, especially when our landfills are reaching capacity. When food waste gets mixed in with landfill waste, it breaks down in an airtight environment and produces methane, a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. In fact, it's at least 28 times stronger. This is an issue we could easily address, and given today's climate crisis, it's something the city should be doing. So, what's the solution? Rather than put food waste in with the landfill, where it produces methane, we could be collecting this organic waste and turning it into usable soil for the city gardens and local farmers. Doing so would drastically cut our landfill greenhouse gas emissions and create a useful byproduct that can be used to grow more food locally. A few other reasons why composting is incredibly useful in the city and why we should be doing it now include: 1, it lightens and cleans up our garbage. Organic food waste is one of the densest and dirtiest types of waste in our garbage. By removing it, we can make our garbage bins a lot lighter and a lot cleaner. This makes it much easier for people to recycle too, as you can look in your garbage and take out any recyclables before tying the bag. It's very hard to do so today when our garbage is mixed with organic waste. 2, it facilitates sustainable packaging. A lot of businesses in London now are using compostable plant-based containers and straws for their go-to items. Right now, these compostable items are either going into landfill, into recycling, or being littered. For these items to break down properly, they must go into local composting facilities. Having composting in London enables the transition to more sustainable packaging in the city and allows these plant-based single-use items to be broken down into usable soil rather than adding to the waste problem. And 3, it makes compost that can be used to improve soil quality. As I mentioned, composting our food waste provides fertile soil that can be used around town, sold to farmers, or given back to the communities. This reduces the amount of synthetic fertilizer that needs to be purchased from elsewhere. So in summary, municipal composting is a great exemplar of a circular economy at work. Rather than dump our excess food in the ground, wrapped in an airtight landfill never to be seen again, we can collect it, break it down into soil to be used again to grow food and improve local soil quality. Doing so, the city can see a reduction in waste going to landfill, less methane emissions, and have useful product on top of that. I ask that City Council make composting a priority today and not just put it on the to-do list for the future. The sooner we do it, the greener our city will become. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just want for the record, I did not kick the cute baby making noises out of the meeting. I do have an update for those still in the gallery. Earlier in the meeting, I asked if, after you spoke, if you could vacate to make space. Everybody has been asked in the Overflow Rooms if they'd like to come in and speak, and so we have everybody here, so you don't have to leave anymore. You can stay and listen to the comments from the other members of the public, and I appreciate everybody who took the opportunity to do so, to move to the wait room, who can hear what we're saying as well. So everybody's welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting, and also thank you very much for keeping your comments on time. It's very helpful as we move through. So lower microphone.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Daniel Hall, and I'm the Executive Director of London Cycle Inc., a nonprofit with 300 members working to help more Londoners ride more often. I'm not here to point fingers or claim the moral high ground, but to describe our vision for what London could look like in 4 years' time at the conclusion of this budget. It's September 2023, and the last project of a 40-kilometer expansion of the safe cycling network is nearing completion. The growth in the amount of Londoners choosing to bike has been exponential in the past few years, with each successive opening of a safe cycling route. We're well on our way to 5% of trips made by bike. The common refrain from new cycling commuters is that they've rediscovered the simple joy of riding their bike. On this day, I see a flurry of Western students rolling down Sarnia Road on their way to class. They're grinning ear to ear, not because of the upcoming subject matter, but because it's downhill. I see a group of seniors cycling along Wavell on their way to the East Lyons Community Center. They're chatting to each other as they leisurely pedal along. I see a woman dressed in her office attire riding with her teenage son along Colburn Street. She's headed to work downtown, and he's headed to class at CCH. They wave their goodbyes as they go their separate ways. Dundas Place is brimming with people, both cycling and walking. As a class ends at Fanshawe, students spill out onto the street, unlocking their bikes to head to main campus or grabbing lunch at a nearby restaurant. They cross the street with ease because on this street, people get priority. What I see is joy, connection, and a healthy community life. But most importantly, I don't see fear. People are riding confidently because they are protected from passing vehicles. There's also a buzz in the province about London's bike network. Residents and advocates from other cities are starting to point to London as a leader and want what we have. We've received awards, cut ribbons, and are touted as a city with bold ambitions. Crucially, our post-secondary students have made a connection with our city and have made cycling a key part of their lives. They can't imagine not being able to get around safely and conveniently on a bike and want to call London home. Not only is the air noticeably cleaner, our reporting is showing that the transportation sector's emissions are finally starting to decline. As a city, we've made substantial progress toward meeting our climate change targets. This is certainly what we'd like to see in London, and I hope you do as well. London CycleLink, together with Western Active Transportation Society, are proposing 2 initiatives for the multi-year budget. The first is a 40-kilometer expansion of the cycling network designed for all ages and abilities. This would have a price tag of around $30 million and would represent an additional $4.75 million per year over what is currently budgeted. We are proposing this difference in funds come from the existing road widening budget or from an applicable reserve fund. In a time of climate emergency and unsafe streets, we need to act decisively to move forward. This would avoid any property tax increase. The second initiative is to create a staff position as a cycling and walking manager at City Hall, someone responsible for implementing the cycling master plan. Other comparable cities have multiple people in this role, and it offers the opportunity to increase staff capacity while saving on external consultants. This would represent a $70,000 to $90,000 annual investment in the operating budget. We'd also like to express support for the other environmental initiatives, the Climate Emergency Declaration, the Green Bin Program, subsidized transit passes, and better snow clearance for sidewalks and bus stops. All of these items help us realize our vision of a healthy, vibrant London. I'd like to finish with a personal vision. In 2023, my son will be 8 years old. I hope I can pick him up from school and we can ride together downtown, catch a bite to eat before watching the Knights game. I hope on our way home, we can experience the wonder of a London at night. It's my favorite time to ride. Thank you.
Thank you. Upper microphone.
Good evening. For the record, my name is David Isaac, ISAAC. Last year, London declared a climate emergency. Since that time, the city has not made changes that will significantly reduce London's greenhouse gas emissions. This budget contains hundreds of millions in expenditures for road widening. However, studies show that widening roads does not reduce traffic congestion. Close to 50% of London's greenhouse gas emissions come from vehicles. Spending hundreds of millions on projects that will increase these emissions while failing to accomplish their goal is not a prudent use of funds. Conversely, bike lanes have been shown to reduce congestion. A new DC study should be conducted and the relevant bylaw should be amended such that it provides that the money is spent on bike and transit lanes, not car lanes. At the same time, funding for active transportation through tax streams must be substantially increased. If it is not, City Council is sending Londoners the message that it is not adequately addressing climate change. Building protected bike lanes is a remarkably cost-effective way for London to decrease its greenhouse gas emissions. Research shows that increasing the length of a bicycle network by only 7% reduces the city's greenhouse gas emissions by 2%. On average, more than 50% of the population is interested in cycling, but is concerned about safety. These people would bike more if there were proper cycling infrastructure, but will not bike until they feel safe. If City Council builds protected infrastructure, Londoners will bike. This infrastructure must be protected, not painted, as research shows that painting bike lanes is associated with an increase in cars close passing cyclists. In addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, cycling has been proven to have numerous positive impacts, including the following. They stimulate economy and support local businesses. Cyclists spend more money than drivers at local shops. Bike lanes increase residential property values. Workers who walk or cycle to work are happier and more productive. Cycling to work is associated with reduced stress. Walking or cycling to work is associated with positive health and economic outcomes. Protected bike lanes, but not painted lanes, decrease fatalities for all road users, including drivers. Elderly people who bike have improved cognition and well-being, and for 2 of every 3 disabled people, cycling is easier than walking. And I have footnotes if anyone wants to talk about this later. There are numerous examples of cities which were initially hesitant to build cycling infrastructure because of concerns that there was not enough cyclists to justify it. Each of these cities found that once protected bike lanes were built, the number of cyclists spiked dramatically. Importantly, this was true even in colder, snowier, and rainier cities in London. For instance, Calgary saw a 400% increase in winter cyclists, the total number of cyclists nearly doubled, and cycling trips to the downtown core increased by 35%. Edmonton saw an 81% increase in cyclists 1 year after opening 8 kilometers of protected bike lanes. Seattle bike ridership increased by 413% after upgrading 1 key corridor from painted to protected. And Ottawa saw an increase of 240% in cyclists after installing a protected bike lane. If London builds a network of protected lanes, we can anticipate that the people who are interested in cycling but concerned about safety will begin to cycle, thus decreasing London's greenhouse gas emissions. Our best estimates indicate that we have fewer than 10 years to significantly cut emissions. The time for decisive action is now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the upper microphone on this side.
I'm going to go from an investment perspective. Part of this budget is based on taxes, and our taxes come from 3 things: business, homes, and the high rises, high density living of rentals. And as an urbanization city, we have to look at what our problems are, and some of the taxes pay for our common amenities and our luxuries, and I don't think making something pretty is a necessity when some of the necessities of paying out of the budget are problematic, like housing and transportation, and the climate change issues. I'm kind of thrilled that the mayor did mention about going electrifying for all the bus fleets. Hopefully other cities do that, and with that savings, perhaps give free transit to seniors to boost ridership. But the other side of it is the transit has its issues, and part of attracting businesses is making sure transit goes to the industrialization areas, because not everybody has vehicles, and even at minimum wage, you cannot afford a vehicle. And with the other woos of the transportation is like the university students take up a lot of the space, and we need to improve that. But that's an asset. But the other part is the housing, and it's very problematic, and it's not about the growth of people coming and buying $400,000 plus houses in these suburbs and building and having that money to go to build subdivisions and maintain that. It's about the inward and upward of high density, which people, the builders and the developers pay a lot of taxes. And I think some of that money needs to go back into your housing initiatives, all of them, not the ones that you crossed off, because part of being employed is finding affordable housing. And being an investor, you sell property to make money for your retirement. And a lot of people are doing arrears for their apartments, and that people have to pay out of their pocket. Like that causes people to have to increase the rent. So other people pay for that. So affordability for people to be employed is very needed. On minimum wage, you can go about $1,000 is what your base can be to pay rent. Nothing around downtown is going to be that.
In Woodfield, even houses are 400,000. Some of the larger properties are going for apartments are about 1,000 plus. So we need to address the housing problem, but it's about just the low income aspect of it too. Part of the low income is your homelessness, and the homelessness is caused by probably the mental health issues. If you read, the mental health wards are full. People that are on drugs go to the mental health ward because they get better service than community agencies. It's complex. And we enable these drug addicts, and enabling, if you need to understand the definition, go to an Al-Anon meeting. Enabling is a positive or a negative, and we need to be more positive with harm reduction and not in enabling people that way, but in getting them back to employable status. We can be nice to people. A lot of the homeless are drug addicts, and some of them are kicked out of social housing because the policies around social housing are not working for everybody, and we need more social housing, and you need to invest in building more social housing, but also building more not-for-profit entities too that are separate from the municipal perspective of they pay for that social housing. Maintenance is another issue. It's everybody's problems. I have friends that live in the Medallion buildings are full of the cockroaches and bed bugs. Other buildings are full of them that's never had them. It's a hygiene issue. It's an education issue where people have to pay like $15,000 to fix and renovate an apartment that's been gutted by drug addicts. I don't know where those numbers are coming out of. I think they're a little outrageous, but being very efficient in running your social housing is needed. With the solar and being more climate conscious in that is needed. Basically, we need to increase our transportation and not just the roads. I've driven in the city in rush hour, and it is stressful for some people, but it's only in your own head, depending on how you drive. It depends on how fast you get somewhere. If you want to run reds, you're not going to get too far ahead. Transit is definitely a need for the downtown core because a lot of people work in Hyde Park or
That's
live in
5
Hyde
minutes.
Park that live
Thank
out
you.
in work in downtown and
That's-
live in Hyde Park. So, I mean, your transit has to
Great.
change a bit.
Everybody
so.
gets 5 minutes. We just didn't catch your name. If you want to share your name, we'd like to add that to the official record.
My name?
Yes, please.
Kim.
If you're willing to share it. Thank you. I'll go to the lower microphone now.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chair, Mayor, and City Councilors. Also, Councillor Lewis, I love that you wore green. You're matching. You got the memo. My name's Skylar Frank, and I'm the Executive Director at the London Environmental Network. The network supports 45 different environmental groups in the city and also runs a program called Green Economy London that helps businesses set and achieve sustainability targets like energy, water, and waste reduction. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to citizens regarding the upcoming budget. I'm here to outline a few business cases that help further the city's climate emergency declaration and are essential to act upon if we are taking climate action. So, as previous people have spoken about, London's climate is changing. Our weather is getting wetter, hotter, more severe. The city is subject to more intense weather events such as flooding, heat waves, severe thunderstorms, ice storms, and snowstorms. And we saw a perfect example of that this month with record-breaking rainfall, flooding basements, and millions of tons of raw sewage being released into the Thames River. These extreme weather events are only going to continue, and London needs to both have a plan and have funding that backs up that plan to take climate action in this budget cycle. Flooding in January is an extreme weather event and highly unusual, as I've chatted with some of the city staff about. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the highest accepted scientific authority on climate change, estimates we have about 10 years left to avoid catastrophic damage. So these next 4 years are crucial in that battle against climate change. And this budget cycle, not to put pressure on you, but it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to tackle that. It's going to have a dramatic impact on whether we do our fair share of climate action as a city, and it's all hands on deck because cities like London across North America have this opportunity to lead the way in a transition to a more climate-friendly world. So in other words, this budget has to be our temporary climate emergency plan until the final climate emergency plan can be published. But not to worry, city staff are working on various initiatives. They've set out a suggestion of doing net zero by 2050, having a screening tool to evaluate programs from a climate emergency lens. The Mayor Lovely yesterday announcement about buses being electrified by 2050. And so all those plans and targets are fabulous, but we do need funding in order for those to achieve reality. So the specific business cases I'm here to talk about real quickly is business case number 1, the waste diversion plan. We'd love to see a green bin program in the city as well as improved recycling programs. And it is essential in order if we want to expand our landfill and save costs on not having to ship our garbage somewhere else. So that is an extremely important program to move forward. Business cases 5A and 5B. Having 5A administratively prioritized is lovely, but if you don't prioritize 5B as well, you don't really have any funding to do any action. So 5A and B at the same time needs to be funded. Business case number 25, winter maintenance program, clearing sidewalk and bus stops. We'd love to see that. It also overlaps from a gender lens, as was talked about, and an accessibility lens. So that's hitting multiple areas. Business case number 15, subsidized transit passes. More people on our buses is better. Less people in their cars equals less emissions. And then as well, business case number 3, back to the river. The health of the Thames is essential for a city's well-being, and the environmental assessments, invasive species removal, erosion control, all of that looks fabulous. So those are the main 5 that we've kind of identified as being really important. In addition, we would like to express that we're encouraging less road widening. I understand it is a very complex issue and it's built in development charges and different budgets, but I just encourage councillors that any opportunity you can find to reduce road widening expenses, that would be wonderful because that's actively going against the climate emergency target. Also, we'd encourage investment in cycling infrastructure and in cycling staff, as London Cycling Dan spoke about. We do need to be investing more in cycling and improving our infrastructure so that people feel more confident on bikes and then they'll get out of their cars as well. Again, I appreciate the time that you've taken to listen to the feedback. I don't envy your position because I know you're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions and you have many priorities competing for funding. I do think that climate action can no longer sit, though, on the back burner and should be one of the top priorities in this multi-year budget. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The lower microphone on this side.
Hello, my name is Anali Barger. I'm currently living in the East End near, well, I guess East-ish, and near the Western Fairgrounds. I've been living in London for over 10 years. I came here for the resources from a smaller town in about 4.5 hours north of here because London has the resources. I find it interesting when some people are frustrated when a lot of people come that need resources when London gets the funding for the resources. I wanted to speak to specifically the housing and poverty issues in London as I've seen them, I've experienced them. I've been homeless here, I've been an addict here, I've lived on the streets here, and I just wanted to know some of the things that I've noticed. And culturally, I recognize this is a budget meeting, but when you are enforcing the budget or following through with projects on the budget, it's really important to keep in mind how that's happening. I've noticed that there's been a lot of efforts to drive people on street level out of downtown. A few years back, it was playing classical music, which we all experience now, which is lovely. There's a lot of folks who are classically trained musicians who end up on the street who don't make it musically, so I found it really interesting when that happened. And the moving of Ontario Works, the diversion of buses from downtown, and perhaps I can give people the benefit of the doubt, maybe that was not the intention when that happened, but it's just something that I've noticed that affects these things. There's a lot of tent cities that have been dismantled throughout the city when all of our shelters are at capacity, and people have nowhere else to go, and they have no community. And people don't understand that a lot of folks on street level take care of each other, and there's a lot of high needs happening. And when tent cities are dismantled, there's people who don't have the supports of the very little community that they had access to. And then you see more of London's poverty. There's so many pockets of poverty all over London, and all of the services are bottlenecking. And yes, affordable housing is very, very important. And talking about, a few people have mentioned that just what is affordable housing, what qualifies, and I think it's important to look at what the living wages or the living allowances are on Ontario Works and ODSP, which are the first sort of step resources that folks on street level have towards stability. On Ontario Works, folks get about $400 a month for rent. And I can't think of a single place besides maybe a bedroom in a house, possibly, that you could do that, but that's not really realistic. And on ODSP, it's less than $600 a month for rent. That's affordable. So when thinking about affordable housing, that's what affordable is. And a lot of people don't realize that. The expectation is that people dip into their food, their transportation, their medication in order to pay rent. And that's not public knowledge, not really. I mean, it's knowledge that the public can have access to, but typically doesn't. And those are the sorts of things that I want people to realize going forward when talking about affordable housing, when talking about poverty and homelessness in London. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Upper microphone.
Okay, you've probably been wondering who the cute baby is. This is Maeve.
Again, I did not kick the cute baby
Yeah, I
out
know
of the
you didn't
meeting
kick
for
This is
making
Maeve.
cute
She's
sounds.
had her chance, so I'm going to try. I'm Jen Epp. I live around Hamilton and Highbury. My priorities are absolutely climate change. I think that is linked to affordable transportation, to waste diversion, green bin programs, river revitalization, and I'm also quite concerned about housing. I think we had a lot of people with fantastic data and information and ideas. I want to share a few stories to make that mean something, hopefully to you. I came here, I've been concerned about climate for a long time, but I came here because my daughter, who spoke earlier, came home from school and asked me if the world was going to explode. And she wasn't kidding. Académie de la Tamise is the school she goes to. I know this is happening at other schools too. The kids at those schools are talking about what happens for them as a result of climate change, and they don't understand, but we do. We have a responsibility to understand and respond to that. I want to be able to tell my daughter, no, the world, well, I can already tell her that, the world's not going to explode. She also wants to know if the fires in Australia are going to happen here. She asked, is Canada going to save the world? And I said, no. No, it has to be everybody, everywhere, working together, and we in London have a chance to do that, and you have specific asks in the budget that respond. So I would like to see a climate emergency action plan that isn't just words, but that gets funded so we can do it. So I'm strongly in support of the climate emergency action plan, and I think what a lovely opportunity you have, because transit funding and waste diversion and river cleanup are all related. Encouraging protected cycling lanes are related. You can solve, well, not solve, you can work towards solving more than one problem at once. Awesome. I know you're going to have to do some prioritization. I want to say something about the concrete as well. Concrete was mentioned earlier by the much more knowledgeable gentleman. What you may not know is that concrete uses a lot of sand, and this is an environmental problem as well. We're running out of sand, and there's a lot of sand theft around the world where we're stripping beaches. Companies go in and strip beaches of all the sand, and so when we're thinking about revitalizing the river, maybe less concrete, more cleanup as well. And then I want to tell a story about housing. So we own our own home now, but for a long time we were living in the Kipps Lane area. And again, like everybody else, we had bed bugs and cockroaches, and I didn't realize the health impact that was happening then, because as soon as we moved, both my older daughter and I stopped needing puffers. She was having asthma. She missed a month of school because of asthma, hasn't used a puffer since we moved. So these are not just annoying critters, it's a health concern for London. We were living there not because, we did have a choice. As soon as we got bed bugs, we left. Everybody in that building now, the buildings that I was in house, I would say about 600 different families. It's a collection of 5 or 6 very tall buildings. Some of those buildings have been condemned now. This is the rumor that I hear from former neighbors, so I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I am very worried because I have friends who have tried to move and haven't been able to. I've been part of looking for housing for newcomer families, refugee families, and it's almost impossible to find. And I'm worried for my neighbors, that the people that I used to live with who don't have the ability to choose to live somewhere else like I did. and I know firsthand the health impact that that can have. So enough of the annoying, sad stories, but it's important to know about that. I think that you have an opportunity in this budget so that I can go back and say to my daughter, yeah, our friend can find a place to live. Yes, we are doing something so that you don't have to worry so much about the world exploding, which is not going to do. And I would also, I have heard, unfortunately, some councillors expressing doubt about climate, and I would encourage people to listen to the scientific consensus from people who have studied that more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If anybody wants to use the upper microphone, it's your turn.
I'm here to talk about housing. We definitely need housing, RGI housing specifically, more than we need affordable housing with the housing wait list that's happening in the city. People talk about RGI housing and they look at it like, okay, we're not making any money off RGI housing. Well, look at Windsor, what Windsor is doing. Windsor actually is addressing climate change by having solar panels on the RGI housing units. So they're collecting hydro and selling it back to the city, generating money. So that's something that we can look at. Okay, so that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Lower microphone.
Thanks for spending this time with us. I know that you're all between a rock and a hard place. There's no way you can satisfy us all. And even though I feel sympathetic to you on that, I'm going to come to you with my requests anyway and just pile them on there. I want to talk, as many people have, about housing, and I really want to thank our local media who've done a good job about making it personal, interviewing people. And just recently on CTV, we were shown an apartment unit that had been housed by, anyway, where the tenants had been a single mother and her child. And, you know, when they left, the unit was in terrible condition and there was drug paraphernalia strewn about. And of course, this is quite shocking, especially when we think that there's a child being raised in that environment. But I think about, you know, all the things that might have helped that mother. We don't know how old that mother was or how old the child is. But, you know, we did hear that that building really needs security, but the not-for-profit can't afford security. If there was 24-hour security, maybe the people who are trying to come in and use that apartment as a kind of drug party place would maybe be kept out, and maybe that mom and that child would have a fighting chance. So what's going to happen with that child, you know, the environment that the child is growing up in, and in 10 or 15 years, are we going to be trying to address that child's addictive, you know, behavior? And I just want to mention that story to really bring home that this is a crisis. We keep using the word crisis. So let's treat it as that. Like I'm urging you to spend even more in the budget and direct it to addiction and housing, because we're talking about human misery that only gets worse. It only cycles up further. You know, people who become newly homeless will probably fall into drug addiction very quickly. So every year that we wait, I know we all know this, every year that we wait, the problem just gets bigger. I want to talk to you as well about the One River project. And I know that there's so many great things in the One River project, you know, soil erosion, addressing that. The project, the part of the project that involves the old hospital lands, that sounds amazing. But I'm talking specifically about sort of the jazzing up of the Fork of the Thames and, you know, creation of an observation deck. It's going to require concrete footings, hardscaping. All of this is contrary to what's appropriate where parkland meets waterways. And where parkland meets waterways is really critical environment for, you know, a whole range of species. And good for those donors, but most of the money is still going to come from us. So please don't spend that money. We know we have so many more places for that money to go. One last thing, about climate change, please spend less on widening the roads. I'm a senior who drives a car. I really rely on my car. I walk as much as I can, but I think my cycling days are long behind me. And still, I'm asking you, spend less on road widening. Thank you. My name is Vicki Van Linden.
Thank you, Vicki. I know some new people have come in. Just if you see the clerk or I putting up our hands, we're just signifying 30 seconds left, Mark, just so you have an opportunity to know when we're wrapping up. I just wanted people who come in to know that we're not trying to cut you off. We're just letting you know you have about 30 seconds left. Everybody's been really great with time, though. Lower microphone over here.
Thank you, City of London City Council, sitting today as Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, for hosting today's public participation meeting on the 2020 to 2023 multi-year budget, the second multi-year budget in London's history. I appreciate the multi-year budget approach, as it allows us as a city to plan bigger initiatives and look at the where we want to go and the how we get there with the bigger picture. The annual updates, though, allow us to further refine priorities and initiatives as our city changes and has new ideas, new needs, and a changing landscape. Subsidized transit, including the income-related transit program, is vital to Londoners' participation in our society and in our city, such as going to school, to work, to participating meaningfully and purposefully in our community. Overall, the programs only strengthen and empower our community and help address London and Mayor Ed Holder's priorities for the year ahead of jobs, transportation, and helping the most vulnerable, as noted in Mayor Holder's State of the City address yesterday morning. Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi hotspots through the London Public Library and Wi-Fi through recreation facilities ensures equitable internet access to all members in our community, regardless of socioeconomic status and ability to pay. Wi-Fi and recreation facilities, including arenas, community centers, and city facilities, allows anyone of all ages to get online. In 2020, we're no longer in a place where Wi-Fi and internet access is a luxury. It's needed for education, banking, and participating in the world around us. The average cost savings on the Wi-Fi hotspot program was 22 cents per person or per resident if eliminated. So let's remember, friends, this is about a quarter per person on average. Let's all ensure all of us can participate, and let's step up to ensure we can all be online in 2020. Looking at Wi-Fi in city recreation facilities is something that as a city our size should have. Why, you ask? Let's flip back to August 2019 with the Old East Village explosion. Many people evacuated to Carling Heights Optimus Community Center and Boyle Community Centers to connect with city and community resources. In a situation such as this, which no one could have predicted, this would have been helpful. Utilizing mobile data in a crisis can be costly and can have technological difficulties if cellular towers and our infrastructure is impacted. In a crisis, internet can be life-saving, mobilizing your networks, contacting resources, supports, and so much more. Outside of a crisis situation, this really benefits everyone of all ages and abilities. Siblings working on homework and education while at a sibling sports activity or recreation activity through Spectrum, for example. Increasing support to the winter maintenance program through decreasing the minimums of snow plowing from 8 centimeters to 5 on sidewalks and bus stops isn't by any means a perfect solution, but it's a start. We can and we need to do better. Safer sidewalks and safer communities for all, no matter how someone participates, via car, walking, cycling, busing via public transit, rolling in a wheelchair or motorized scooter. Sidewalks are connectors and pathways to communities, to potential and to connectedness. Let's all work together for a safer, more active and inclusive community for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Upper microphone.
Hi, my name is Catherine O'Neill of 359 Flanders Row. I'd like to voice some agreement with the gentleman earlier who requested we delay the green bin program by 1 year. I had already pointed out that while the public survey showed the public wants the program, they only agreed to between $1 and $25, if I recall. not 19 million in 2020 for operations and another 36 million in 2020 for capital expenses for unknown technologies. You might think I don't care about the environment. Not so. I just think that since we don't have the processes decided yet, these figures do not belong in the 2020 budget. Last, as an environmentalist and a dedicated cultural volunteer, I'm kind of concerned by this budget pie graph, which is my own, which shows 3% of spending for trash and 3% of spending for culture. It appears that spending for trash disposal is running neck and neck with our entire arts and culture budget. I think culture should win, not by raising our taxes. As the same gentleman earlier said, we are kind of maxed out on more taxes. I'm very concerned about environment, but throwing money at problems is not the solution. And I could support a green bin program if it had two other partners first. One, a brown bin program to dramatically increase the diversion of organic matter back into the ground as close as possible to the source of the food waste. This would include not only more backyard composting, but on-site small facilities for restaurants and other large food services, for example. And then two, my favorite, the invisible bin. This is the one where you pretend to throw all the single-use plastics and tons of completely unnecessary excess packaging that you and I can stop purchasing. The plastic bottles, the Timmy cups, the giant laundry soap containers, it's easy. As well as encouraging less money for CEAP plans and CEEP tools, I recommend we move some of those tens of thousands of dollars over to more projects for LEN groups, because I hear they're getting $5,000 for 5 projects. I propose that we use 2020 to focus on initiatives not only by our city staff, because they can't do it all, but with all the LEN and other environmental groups, and all of us as individuals, we're responsible, to use the invisible bin more and more. As, and now you're going to see I'm a teacher, A, it's free. B, it creates much less pollution caused by manufacturing and transportation of needless trash. C, it'll save us millions. D, fish can swim again. E, the Lorax may finally come back. And F, maybe we'll even have more money for things like arts and culture. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody at the upper microphone unless you'd like to speak. I'll go to the lower one then. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Amber Cantel. Like Sandy earlier, I'm known for wearing several hats, but I'm here tonight as a citizen. And I'm here to speak specifically to some of the framing around the climate emergency. I want to note that it's important to recognize that the climate emergency is not a typical emergency. This isn't a one-off flood for our city. It's not an ice storm that levels our trees. It's not emerald ash borer, an outbreak of SARS, or a 5-year recession. Climate change will be an emergency after emergency. It will be steadily worsening conditions, unrelenting, year after year for the rest of this century, even in the United Nations' most optimistic projections. So it is not one emergency, it is thousands. It will be unlike anything our community has ever faced. The sorts of fires Australia is seeing now, Canada and Russia will see next. In Fort McMurray, we already have the dubious distinction of being the first country in the world to have a municipality basically burned down due to climate change effects. 50 years ago, that is not the sort of thing the people sitting in your seats had to worry about. Past governments we know now took too long to realize and accept the implication of a rapidly changing climate. Now, because we have waited so long, we have a lot of catching up to do. We know we will need to reduce emissions by about 5% every year, year after year, without fail, starting now and until we hit net zero, to avoid basically complete catastrophe. Moving our energy systems 5% year after year at that kind of rate, that's basically, as another speaker mentioned earlier, that's wartime level mobilization. That is what it is going to take. And to me, so while the various environmental business cases included in the budget are all really positive and making important progress, I don't know that for me as a citizen, I feel like those are intended to achieve that scale and that speed of change. I was especially surprised to see case study 5 broken into 2 parts, part A being the plan and part 5B being actually doing something about the plan, the implementation component. It only made it onto the for consideration list for a whole $1.22 a taxpayer. You are our leaders. You should not be debating if you're going to wait another 4 years to implement your climate change plan. It is go time. The only question we need to be asking now in an emergency like this is not, can we do case study 5A or 5B or the green bin? It needs to be, is this everything we can do? We are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the gentleman who let someone else go in front of him if you'd like to speak now.
Oh, good evening. My name is Regeneration. I live on 869 Main Street. I don't know if you might remember the saying of one of our former mayors. I don't want to mention his name here. He has said in public during his campaign, there will be no increase in tax. Why did he say that? There will be no increase in tax. He knew that the collection of city tax is solely based on the total market value of the housing in the City of London. So simply by having an increase in market value, more tax revenue will be collected without increasing the tax rate. If the population of the city goes up, more people require housing accommodation. Consequently, the prices of houses will go up. It is a good old law, supply and demand. If demand is high and the supply is low, we will pay a higher price for housing. Hence, the city will collect more money from tax revenue without increasing the tax rate, because the market value of the housing has gone up. MPAC is a non-profit organization. MPAC collects and updates the sale price of houses in the province of Ontario. MPAC sells information so that it can pay for the salaries of its staff, executive, and operation. I don't know the total market value of the housing in the City of London, but the City of London should know it, because the City of London pays for the services of MPAC to supply that information. Councillors, will you please ask your staff about the total market value of the housing in the City of London, the figure they had used for last year's tax collection. For the upcoming year's tax collection, what is the new total market value for London as provided by MPAC? If you own a house, you will receive a notice assessment from MPAC. You will notice that every time you receive the notice, the value of your house has gone up and you will never come down. Speaking personally, I'm a senior. I live on a fixed pension. Yes, the market value of my house has gone up over time. Yes, when I sell the house, I shall have a gain in the market value of my house. But in the meantime, I do need a place to live. When I die, my beneficiary will have the financial gain of the market value of my house. Until then, I keep paying more tax every year. Yes, I'm being taxed on its value today, not on its value when I sell it. Right now, I do need a place to live. Are you pushing some seniors out of the houses by raising the property tax all the time? In essence, the final tax dollar revenue will still go up without changing the tax rate, because the total market housing value has already gone up. In closing, please ask yourself, what's the total market value of the housing that they are going to use for the purpose of tax collection in the coming year? Please do a comparison between last year's total value of London housing market as compared to the value in the coming tax year. In conclusion, I would like to ask that you consider very carefully the implications and consequences for taxpayers of raising the tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to give this side a quick opportunity first. Is there someone over here? I'll come back. We'll go to this gentleman.
I saved to the end because I came here on the spur of the moment. Didn't have a written down speech, and the camera is off, maybe, so I won't be embarrassing myself. But I want to know by a show of hands, how many of you get the newspaper in the paper edition?
We're here to listen to you, and
Well, I wanted to make a
we're not
point
going
of
to do
that
a
anyway.
question and
Okay.
answer. So you go ahead with your comments. We're
My
here to
name is
listen.
Gary Manley. I read a lot of letters to the editor, and most of them, if you read the paper, are about how the city is run. And I'd like somebody to answer them sometimes. But I wanted to bring up a couple. I want to be here on the benefit of the car drivers. Everybody's against car drivers, but seeing as we allow them, there's a lot of parking mistakes around the town where I'd like you to look and see where all the tickets are given and see what the reason is. I go to St. Joseph's Hospital quite a bit because my wife and mother have eye trouble. And the meter man puts out hundreds of tickets on one block. And that's on Grosvenor, just east of the hospital. And I was talking to him about it. One of the problems is there's a fire hydrant kind of behind a telephone pole. Telephone pole says an hour parking. There's a kind of a broken looking sign saying no parking. But in the States, they paint the curbs red where you can't park. And I noticed down by Victoria Park, they put X's on the spots in front of the meter where you can't park. We need to look and see where these tickets are coming from. I know you're making money on it, but we're the ones paying your salary. Try and give us a break. That in busy areas, mark the curbs red where you can't park. In that same neighborhood, the last 3 people by Victoria or by St. Joe's didn't want people parking in front of their house. So if you walk back to that telephone pole 2 houses away, it'll show you can't park down there. It's just crazy. The same as at the children's splash pad. You know that parking lot there down by the health center? The left hand is parking, the right hand is reserved till 6:30. I go there, I went there quite often when I had a dog, but I always parked on the left because the meter's on the left. This one time I go and I pulled in, it was a wheelchair spot. So I look out my back window, the sign I could see on the spot behind me said, pay at the meter. I backed in, paid. 3 minutes later, I got a $40-some-odd parking ticket because the sign above that in a bunch of words says it's reserved till 6:30. You need just one sign that says no parking until 6:30, then pay at the meter. But every post on those spots, the lower sign, big red sign with lots of writing said, pay at the meter. It's kind of like a scam ticket deal. But the other part I got about driving is our roads. Do you like driving around London and have the road closing signs and that wrong? You know, it'll say the right lane is closed, it's the left. The left lane is closed, it's the right. No lanes are closed and the sign is still there. And when I called downtown one time when I was driving down Warncliffe and it said the right lane was closed and I could see a kilometer and it wasn't, the lady told me, well, the sign people are different than the construction group. So they don't have time to come next week. They put the sign up this week. I wrote a letter to the editor about that one time and I want to see a revolving sign. One side is left, one side is right, and you can have it like this when it's fixed. And maybe the guys fixing the road could turn it. But we're driving 2-ton vehicles and the signage is wrong. You don't see that in Toronto when you're driving around, but I believe that we need to look into that here. And my other topic would be, we seem to get big thrills out of spending money. And my worst spending story was 2 years ago, we spent $600,000 to rescue cats. You got to give us, the voters, a chance to see if we want to spend our tax money on a $600,000 cat rescue center, and probably their wages have gone up and they got more cats and they need more help. But that isn't something when people are sleeping on the street that we need to put our money into. The same as they're going to replace the Thames River Bridge by Thames Park, and I believe they're going to put $1 million worth of arches or something fancy on it. The city wants to do, build gardens in the middle of the road that we need to hire outside people to look after. That one on Hyde Park, they planted 50 trees, they all died. And I think of a money-saving things. 200 cities in the States have the police and firemen together. Let's get into something like that because the police need help. The firemen could give them a hand.
All right, thank you. We'll go to someone on this side if they'd like to speak. Go ahead. And just don't forget to give your name at the start, and we'll put our hands up at about the 30-second mark.
Hey, Mike. I'm Jason Jordan, and I'm here about how the project can create jobs. So the compost program. If you toss something in the garbage, it's gone. If you toss something in the compost, it gets reused. and people have to work on it. It's people have to process it and sell it and use it. That create jobs. If increasing recycling, once you throw things into the landfill, there is very little economical opportunity to that. It's basically all waste. Bicycle infrastructures, and walking, window magnets. These will all create local jobs. People who walk, take transit, and bike end up spending more money at local places. They don't go to the big boxes where most of the money goes out of town to spend things in Old East, Hamilton Road, plowing in the small little villages within the towns, and that helps create jobs. Housing. I was not living in subsidized housing, but my housing that I was living in, I was only staying there because I could afford the rent. I hardly invited people in because I could not keep up with the maintenance. It was once I was cleaning the place, and things will fall apart. If you don't have a sustainable living area, people are not going to be happy. They're going to be, the mental health is going to go down. My mental health has been deteriorating, and it will help, if not allow the people to have a job, to at least to be more happy, more productive, maybe volunteer, get involved with the community, and help the children continue on. And London also lacks choice opportunities. If you invite, why would somebody come to London unless it is for a special event? Back to the river is a good opportunity for a free opportunity for people to come and enjoy. I go to Sauna about once, couple times a year, just to experience the parks there. It's wonderful. Port Stanley is involved in the parks. I hardly go to the beach, but the other infrastructure is great. Back to the river. Okay, the bridge. Maybe you can use the money for something else, not the project, but it's a small little area in the of the river, but it will allow people to experience the river. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to ask, and I won't hold the public to this, how many more people are looking to speak tonight? 1, 2, 3. Three. I'm just gauging it whether or not to take a quick break right now. Seems like if there's 3, we're just gonna go ahead. So if colleagues are okay with that. All right. So I think most of the hands were over here, so we'll go over here.
Hello, Mr. Chair, Council, City staff, and London community members. My name is Jessica Cordes, and I live on Deveron Crescent in the Pond Mills neighborhood. To begin, I just want to take a bit of a global look and discuss the issue of climate emergency, the climate crisis that we are amidst. Certainly, Canada globally does not have a large footprint, and I'm concerned that that rhetoric has been shared a few times within our city, and without taking an actual look at what per capita Canadians are responsible for. So per capita, Canadians are one of the highest GHG emitters. We create the most waste per capita and use the most water. So there's a lot of work to be done, and as a proud Londoner, I love this city. I think there's a lot of excellent things going on here, and echoing what somebody said earlier about how a great city is really like a great party, and people who are here they stay because they want to stay. That really is my story. I'm somebody who's left London for about 4 years, traveled internationally, and decided to come back here and make my home. One thing that I think we really need to keep in mind with this budget is this is a historical moment for our city and a chance for London to really make a mark as a municipal leader in Canada for climate action. As we've heard from the IPCC, addressing this emergency is going to require transformative and unprecedented changes. So I hope that with every decision that council and city is making, you're asking yourselves, what are we doing here that is helping the climate in every area, and breaking down the silos and using integrative approaches that are adaptive and iterative. So revisiting policies and recognizing that we are entering an area of uncertainty. London has access to top quality fertile soil, some of the best in the world, so we can grow a lot of our own crops and have a sustainable food systems within our area. We also have an abundance of fresh water, and there are many exciting developments going on, such as the West 5 development that's net zero. I fully support all of the investment to separating the stormwater and wastewater management systems. It is appalling, the sewage that entered the Thames River this past couple weekends ago, and I recognize there's been a lot of investments, and I'd like to see that continue, so thank you. I also support the reduction of road widenings as much as possible and the investment in active and public transportation. When you're on your bike and all you can inhale is the fumes, it really doesn't make riding very exciting. So when you're fortunate to be on the TVP or in the park system, it's excellent, but there's definitely more investment that can be made. The organics program, I fully support the 60% diversion strategy and the increased recycling as well. For the business cases, number 5A and B, absolutely 100% supportive, and I'd like to see some timely action on that. And I was really excited to hear about the electric LTC bus, so I hope to see timely action on that again. To close, I would just like to say thank you for the work that has been done there with the climate emergency declaration and the recent report on the update. I think there's a lot of exciting movement, and there's also a lot of opportunity to further integrate this work into all areas of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there were a couple more people who wanted to speak. If you just want to approach the microphones, then I'll know who's ready to go. You can go ahead. Yep. Come on down.
Hi, my name is Rob McQueen. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Rob McQueen, and I'm a citizen of London. I love this city. I was just honored, in the environmental department, and why do I do it is because I love this city. I moved here about 25 years ago. I've lived in many places in Canada, and I've come to London, and I really love this city. And I see that in as much as each of you are sitting in those chairs out there, I know that you have committed yourself to the city as well. And so I'm thankful for all that you've done, and I've sat in here council quite a few times and watched the proceedings, and I'm quite impressed. I won't go on with the climate emergency. I think that's been covered enough. What I was wanting to point out is that in the future we have some other disasters potentially looming. The UN said that in 2050 we're going to have another 2 billion people on the planet. That is a huge number of people, and in the CTV and CBC reported that next year, because of crop failures, that there was going to be an extra $500 lopped on families on their food bills next year. So what I'm getting to is that we need to grow much more food here in London. if you look at the circumstance in California, they had a drought for 4 years, and they had to move much of the production to Florida. And if you understand it, Florida is always getting hammered with hurricanes. And what would happen if the hurricane slammed into Florida and drowned the produce fields? The answer is that we need to grow much more food here in London. And so there's many of us in London that are really anxious to do this. So I commend the past council for their urban agricultural progress that they made in helping and making new laws to allow us to do much more in the urban agricultural department. In this last council, I was here when you added it on, that we're able to grow food in the city and sell it in the city, which is a great improvement. If you think about it, nobody's going to have a market garden if they can't grow it and sell it. That's one of the areas we need to grow in. I'm the administrator of a group called Forge City London, and we're almost 1,900 people. And so my objective in helping the group move forward is teach people how to grow food and also to forage. We're hoping to have many more community gardens and many more food forests in the city. Last year, I bought $10,000 worth of greenhouses. The purpose of that is so that I can grow many nut trees and fruit trees, so that I can give them away to people. I want to give away at least 4,000 trees a year. And my smaller greenhouse, I have a potential of growing 8,000 trees to grow. We need to have trees started now for 15, 20 years from now. Anyways, there's a lot of people in the group that I am involved in that are anxious to help. There's three groups have been were given a park to work on at Killarney. I'll just be quick here. Anyway, so we've had success because we had 28 people help clean up the area. We had 12 people help prune the trees in January and 18 in February. My point is that we have lots of people that are anxious to help. And if council gives us more things that more powers that we can do, and are more progressive in giving us the ability to do these things, we'll do much more.
Thank you. Your time's up. Thank you. I'll go over to this microphone.
I'm Vincent Lebrano III. I live at 10 Beechwood Place. And I wasn't going to speak mainly because I'm a new resident to London, having just moved here in August with my wife, Christina. We retired, moved here from Albany, New York. And we're really enjoying our choice of London as where we're going to spend our retirement. And it's a process like this that has really made us happy with London. So again, my purpose right now is just to thank you for giving the citizens a chance to participate in this process. I was disappointed in a lot of the comments that were made. The people who chose to lecture you, I think you're well aware of the problems that we face as a society. And that's why I'm here to say that I'm one speaker today that's going to tell you that I'm in favor of your budget as it is. I know it's not perfect, but to me, it's considered, it's balanced, and it starts us off in the right ways that we all want to go. We all want to wave the magic wand and fix all of our problems, and it's not going to happen in a 4-year process. It's not going to happen in an 8-year process. But I think the budget that you have, like I said, gets us started on that. And I just want, again, to thank you. This is my second public participation meeting this week. I came to London in my retirement to work on my public advocacy and also to be a volunteer. And I've been successful just in my few months that I've been here in trying to achieve that purpose. So again, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for London and everything that you're going to do for London going forward.
Well, thank you, and of course, welcome to London, and we appreciate the comments. Is there anyone else who would like to speak today? Again, anyone else who would like to speak? And one last time, last chance before we close the public participation meeting. Any members would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I would like to look for a motion from colleagues to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Selly, Councillor Van Holst. If there's no discussion, we'll bring that up for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 12-0.
I just want to remind members of the public who are watching this at home, you may not have been able to come and participate in today's public participation meeting, but if you go on london.ca/budget, you will see that there are a number of ward meetings scheduled across the city. You can go and engage with your own councillors. And we do have a number of budget debates that will be happening over the course of the next few weeks that you can come and observe. If you'd like to participate, there's also one more public participation meeting, much like this one, on February 13th at 6 p.m. right here in council chambers. So there's still lots of opportunity to get involved in the budget process. With that, we have finished the scheduled items. We've already completed the items for direction, deferred matters and additional business. I don't see any. Then I would look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Van Holst, Councillor Van Meerbergen, all those in favor? That carries. We're adjourned. Thank you for coming out today.